2, 1.
Good morning. Recognizing a quorum of commissioners present, I call the May 22nd, 2023 meeting of the Cannabis Control Commission to order. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022 and is being recorded. Commissioners Camargo, Concepcion, Roy, Stebbins, and myself are participating in today's meeting. All votes taken today will be by roll call. For business, we have a full agenda that I will generally summarize. We'll start with opening comments from commissioners, then we will proceed to staff license recommendations. I did want to make a commentary on these second meetings are new or sort of returning to more active opportunity for the commissioners to be able to speak about issues that we're dealing with right now, looking at long-term planning for items that we may want to tackle, both in the current regulatory rewrite process, but also looking to generate ideas for ways that we can further promote and stabilize the cannabis industry while maintaining safety and health. So today we will start with opening comments from commissioners, and I will go in alphabetical order. Commissioner Camargo, would you like to make any opening statements?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you so much, Chair. I'll be brief. I'm excited for today's meeting. I know it's our first one. I'm glad you made the comment in terms of us just still trying to figure out, how these meetings are going to go. And I would say I feel like from our last meeting to today, I feel like it's been weeks, but it's only been about a week and a half. But I'm grateful for it. I think it's time to really dig down into some policy conversations and figuring out how we can, now I call us a new cohort, but how we can move forward. So I'm excited and thank you, Chair. I also know we have 2 licenses on today for final approval, which, again, making sure we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Concepcion.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, and good morning, everyone. I also will be really short and brief. I don't have as much to say that I normally would say on a monthly basis because we just met not too long ago. But Madam Chairwoman, thank you for convening us for this important conversation because we have a lot going on here. There's a lot to sort of unpack. So I'm looking forward to having a full commission conversation about sort of the direction we've been going in terms of regs. And I wanted to also, thank you just because our group is on the agenda today under the Municipal Equity Working Group. And I know there was a lot of work put into that, to the memo, and I look forward to that conversation as well as the other conversations on the docket as well. And that is all.
Thank you. Commissioner Roy, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll be brief. I will echo my colleagues. I just want to thank you, Madam Chair, for convening this second meeting. I think it's vitally important that we're able to address important topics and not have to wait a whole month, and that we're in light of that also we're able to potentially affirm 2 licenses, equity and I believe DBE. So that's great. And I just want to say briefly that I want to just commend my HCA working group, Commissioner Concepcion and Rebecca and Kai and Olivia and Stephen and Kate and Alex. We submitted our HCA policies on Friday to the executive director, so we're excited for that feedback. And then and once we get that back, we're going to be finalizing our draft language as well around HCAs, and I can't wait for the public comment and public feedback to get that rolling as well. So and lastly, I just want to say it's Memorial Day approaching, and we just want to give thanks to those who serve this great nation. So thank you so much for my time.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. Commissioner Stebbins.
Yeah, just to add, thank you, Chair. Appreciate your leadership to add this second meeting to our agenda. And as everybody's pointed out, a chance for us to talk about issues and topics and regulations. I think it's long overdue. I'm happy to be a part of it. So appreciate your leadership and certainly appreciate the staff that, again, on a short turnaround after one meeting has us prepared, ready to go and set up to do a second one. So thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any other comments other than very excited that we're going to have this opportunity as a group to be able to have conversations about important issues that are facing us as a result of Chapter 180 passed by the legislature last year to promote equity at the municipal level, and in keeping with that theme of continuing to promote equity licensees and moving that group forward, we will be having 2 final licenses that are either SEP or economic empowerment applicants. So we're very excited that we can take that small bit of time to do that, but have a larger bit of time to have a conversation. And because I'm still grappling with the agenda and how we manage this, will we have an executive director's report before we do licensing, or will we do the licensing approval first? Executive Director Collins, would you like to go now and make some comments?
Madam Chair.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Matt in my group, and Matt's awesome. So I can't let this meeting go until I say how awesome Matt Giacola is, and he's provided a great perspective from all sides. So, and he's been so helpful coordinating stakeholder meetings we've had so far. So I could not mention Matt. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Executive Director Collins, would you like to make a report now? I'm just, okay, so we do have that. Okay, great.
Sure.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a ton to report to today. As commissioners have indicated, this is a secondary meeting. So the normal information I would provide to you, I will reserve until the June public meeting, just to stay in that cadence. And I would actually like to, I'll include these updates in the June meeting as well, but I think just for your information, we continue to work at the State House relative to the Commission's budget. We are braced this week. The Senate is debating their budget this week prior to Memorial Day. And so obviously by the next public meeting, I'll have an update as far as our success and fate with that particular budget. 2 other just quick updates, and I don't think I'm breaking or scooping anybody on this. First off, I just want to congratulate our CFO, Adriana Leon, who was designated or named by the Boston Business Journal last week as one of their 2023 CFOs of the year. And she was joined by some private sector folks in technology and in other companies. So it was nice to see her recognized, her work recognized. And again, I just wanted to provide her that shout out. And again, more to come on that. And then related to that, frankly, the Supplier Diversity Office, I believe it was last week as well, noted or identified the Cannabis Control Commission as a recipient of an Excellence in Supplier Diversity. And so we'll be getting an award and a citation from Governor Healy. I believe it's in the month of June. So again, that coincides very nicely with the work that Adriana does here at this agency, and certainly reflects, again, the positive contributions that she makes, and probably was an element as far as her being nominated or designated as that CFO of the year. So congratulations to Adriana, congratulations to our entire finance team and all of our staff for their steadfast commitment to ensuring that we walk the walk, frankly, when it comes to supplier diversity, and that as much as we ask our licensees to do, we are willing to do that same work ourselves. So that's just a brief update. Again, I'll look forward to your conversations today. Happy to contribute or participate in any way that I can be productive and helpful. And again, just looking forward to today's meeting. So thank you. And that'll conclude any report that I have.
Great, thank you. And so I believe then we will move to the staff recommendations on final licenses, and Kyle Potvin, I believe, is going to be handling that.
That's correct, Madam Chair. Good morning.
Thank you. And so we have 2 staff recommendations on final licenses. Normally we just do these as a group, but because we don't have very much, I will say both of them. One is Indica LLC, MR284431 retail, and Nudia Fenway LLC, MR284222 retail. Any questions or any comments that you might like to make, Kyle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only comments I would make is that just to kind of reaffirm the information that was stated earlier, Indica LLC is designated by the Commission as a disadvantaged business enterprise, in fact, a minority-only business. Nudia Fenway LLC is designated as an economic empowerment priority applicant, which means that the majority of the ownership there is held by economic empowerment priority applicants certified by the Commission back in 2018.
Great, thank you. So in hearing that recommendation and understanding the importance of continuing to promote social equity within our licensee community, I'm very proud to Commissioner Concepcion, would you care to make a motion to approve these two final licenses?
So moved.
Commissioner Camargo, would you like to second that?
Second.
Having been moved and seconded, I will. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will take a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record reflect. These final licenses have been approved. 5 in favor, none opposed. Now we're going to be moving on to commission discussions and votes. And we will begin that discussion, which is a regulatory review discussion regarding social consumption pilot program. And I will turn that over to Commissioners Stebbins and Camargo, who have been managing that process.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go first, and I'll certainly invite my colleague to weigh in. First of all, I think we have some slides, if we could have those pulled up. There we go. First of all, I want to thank my colleagues for the discussion we had at our last meeting about the topic of the social consumption pilot project. I realize as a result of our discussions that it would have been more helpful to share a little more detail into the working group's approach, our plan for outreach on this key topic, expected work for after our regulatory framework is completed, and again, why the working group unanimously supported to remove the pilot program portion of these regulations, because we view it as not only burdensome, but somewhat unnecessary to our work. Hopefully what we can share today will answer some of the concerns you all have raised, allow us to take a vote on how to move forward. Chair, as you asked at our last meeting, how we are building out the social consumption regulatory framework, hopefully we can offer you some insight into that. Our first slide outlines the working group's approach to this topic. Obviously, our overarching approach to creating this regulatory framework matches the Commission's sustained approach over the last 5 years, a priority to public health and safety and equity along the way. I will tell you that this group is going to be thoughtful and diligent in our development of these new regulations. We'll learn from other jurisdictions, carefully consider the input we will collect, and our goal is to get it right the first time, so we can stand by the thoroughness of the process, offer some sustainability and confidence in the process as we go forward. Our goal is also to consider and create a licensing framework that provides a lucrative business opportunity to our applicants. There's no need to create a license type if applicants question the value of the return on the investment and end up not applying for one of our social consumption licenses. And after that, obviously, we're going to engage a broad and diverse stakeholder group and focus on collaboration with other agencies and partners as we go forward. So that's our approach, and I think it's consistent with how this commission and our predecessors have worked in the past, but giving you an insight as to how the working group has tackled some of the work and designed our approach we thought would be helpful. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Camargo to do the next slide, which gives you some more insight into our outreach strategies.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. I just want to echo and ditto your comments. I think to our fellow commissioners, there's so much work that's going on at the commission, and we are so passionate about the work that we're doing. So I thank you as colleagues for asking tough questions last time around and really pushing us to think. And I think, I think all of us go back and say, what can we do better, right? How do we collaborate and sort of move forward? So I just appreciate the last conversation we had that's bringing us back to today. So just to talk a little bit about outreach, we are inviting participants to add comments prior to the former regulatory process. So I think we've put it out there on newsletters, social media. We continue to ask the public to send us comments prior to, again, the formal regulatory process. And even internally, if folks have, comments that they want to send, it's all game, right? Everyone and anyone can send comments. So I invite folks to continue to do that. We're having ongoing conversations with other jurisdictions and other state agencies. And you'll hear about that more down the line in terms of what other states are doing, what are they looking at, what have been their challenges, what are best practices. So we're definitely making those rounds throughout the country to be able to have that knowledge and to incorporate it into our work. We are going to host 2 public listening sessions in person, and we're going to have one virtually in June. And you all will have more details on that once we confirm everything and everything is all set. And then we've worked with our internal working group, shout out to all of them, but also with Dr. Johnson and her team. We got to give them some special kudos. They have helped us to make sure that our survey makes sense, that we're following best practices, and that we're creating a good survey and a good tool to help us collect that data from the universe who will participate in social consumption. So we're really excited about that. I think we'll have it ready in the next 2 weeks. It has to go through sort of some of the processes here at the commission, and then participants will be getting that survey. So look out for that. Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner. We'll move to the next line. So obviously, there's a lot of work that goes into the regulatory promulgation process, but I think it's also important to understand some of those aspects of work which are going to need to take place even after our regulatory work is done. So first of all, municipalities will have to either vote on a referendum or adopt their own bylaws and ordinances. Chair, I think you raised a thoughtful question last week of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. We'd like to think that our regulatory and licensing framework might help guide communities into making the decisions that they need to make. Cities and towns then will have to consider and construct their own appropriate zoning and planning measures to allow licensees to move forward. Secondly, I think the CCC has the opportunity to collaborate with partners such as DPH and public safety and other agencies to focus on a community education and awareness effort to make sure that public health and safety are maintained. Finally, I think our effective licensing and oversight process, which has obviously evolved over the last 5 years, become more efficient. We have an incredible team, obviously, under the leadership of Director Potvin, who manage that effective oversight and licensing process. That obviously will continue after the regulations are promulgated. I would encourage, the next bullet is about the responsible vendor training program. I would encourage the commission to look at our existing RVT programs and see what additional training for marijuana agents makes sense for this new licensing framework. And then finally, we'll have to make decisions about the exclusivity period outlined in our regulations, and it will allow the commission to consider some outcomes for this new license period. So this work doesn't stop when the regulations are promulgated, I think, and I think our team would agree that, there's additional work that will be ongoing after our regulatory process is wrapped up. Commissioner Camargo, you want to add anything to that?
I think I'm good, Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you.
All right, we'll move to the next slide. Again, trying to keep this short so we can have a discussion. But again, keeping our working group strong and thoughtful approach to our regulatory work, the extensive outreach we have planned, we should pledge to continue, and the additional work that we should pledge to continue after the regulatory work is done. Again, we recommend the commission vote to remove the regulations outlining a pilot program. First, the regulatory and application process will be both burdensome and extensive. The pilot program right now is capped at 12 communities. We have 30 CCC designated areas of disproportionate impact to start. We could unnecessarily be creating a program that may see us receive applications below that number, and we went through all that time and effort to create the pilot program. Or we may see applications in excess of 12, thereby putting the commission in the position of having to reject a community's application. This is also, we think, not a helpful process when the commission remains focused on ensuring equity and opportunity. We would also be limiting a community's ability to adopt social consumption as an integral part of their municipal equity plan. Again, the commission has built and created a structure for providing licenses and ensuring the public health and safety of the industry. By standing up the pilot program, we effectively place ourselves in the position of licensing communities. And I don't think that's a step or a process to witness before in the commission's tenure. And again, I think, as I mentioned last week or at our last meeting, our approach of the creation of the pilot program, I don't think aligns with the voice of the legislature and the communities. We talked about Chapter 180. We talked about the legislature going beyond just getting us the referendum fix that we had all actively lobbied for. But they provided communities the additional steps of creating their own ordinances or bylaws without a local referendum vote. And I think if you go back and look at the MMA testimony that was provided on all the elements of Chapter 180, one of the key statements that they made is that they appreciated the language that allowed communities to opt in. I don't necessarily see, again, the pilot program aligning with both the voice of the legislature as well as some other key stakeholders. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's attention, and hopefully we can have some good conversation. But at the appropriate time, Chair, I'll make a motion for the commission's consideration, but turn it back to you unless Commissioner Camargo has anything else she wants to add.
Commissioner
Camargo?
Stebbins,
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Stebbins, thank you for that. I think you laid it out. We went back and did our homework, so I'm just I'm grateful. And this is good. I think it makes sense. And I'll turn it right back to the chair. It was me talking out loud.
That's good. I do my best thinking out loud sometimes, so I appreciate that. So again, I'll open it up to anyone for questions. I think that we had an opportunity. We've gotten some information from some different folks that I know you guys have really dug in. And first of all, I want to also start by thanking you, because I have felt that this is the trickiest of all the different groups. This is the trickiest problem to solve. There are so many different, public safety and access and equity issues that you have to balance and weigh, in addition to an existing infrastructure that was put in place years ago that may or may not fit now. The one point that I wanted to make, and I don't know if I communicated very well during the last meeting, but I am not wed to the pilot program, right? I'm not wedded to any infrastructure that allows us as a commission to, in essence, create a separate licensing for communities. The issue that I have is not with the pilot program, but it is with the need to move slowly in a way that we can nimbly fix as we see something being licensed and coming into being. And I've given the example of the home delivery. We basically said to equity communities, you're going to be exclusively licensed or exclusively have access to this license. And then we created a regulatory infrastructure that, frankly, there've only been a couple of participants who've been able to make this successful, and it has been a tough slog for them to make it successful. And so now we're going to be in the process of maybe making some regulatory changes, but that's a year and a half in or more of the exclusivity period. And so, to me, one of the biggest issues here is money. We now have the social equity fund, which I believe will, be significantly relied upon for this type of, license class. So, from my point of view, and I did see this in a letter that we received, I don't know if it was yesterday or today, from Eon, but, to me, maybe an alternative to allow us to walk before we run may be a limited number of licensees, and that's why I think it's really important for us to understand what the it is, because to understand what that might mean against the backdrop of funding, against the eligible people who'd like to do it, and not necessarily regulating the communities, but taking things slowly so that that the resources that have now been created will be there and will be leveraged well for a smaller number of people so they can be successful. And two, make sure that we can be nimble, that during any exclusivity period, we can react quickly and we're not impacting, more licenses. So that's kind of my statement question. And I don't know if you, have any, feedback on that, but I kind of hit on most of the issues that I've been thinking of.
Sure. Madam Chair, if I might. I think you've hit the nail right on the head. Obviously, we are at the beginning of this process. I think there is great information for us to go and look at, and the recent comments the other day were helpful. I think two points I would raise that I hope would address your concern. One, we've had this conversation in our working group. We want to create a lucrative business type or business license. That's not lost on us. And I think that, coupled with the survey, which is going out to our SEP, our EE applicants, our micro businesses, and our grower cooperatives, we want to hear from them what they envision, right, as a potential business model that would meet their business abilities, their business needs, as well as, prove lucrative at the end of the day. So I hear you, and I think that's a message that the working group reflected on very early on during our meetings.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, but any other commissioners? Commissioner Concepcion or Roy, would you care to weigh in or ask some questions? Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Camargo and Commissioner Sevens. Appreciate your presentation. My question is around data collection. So I'm going to read to you a provision in the regulations around that regarding the pilot. A pilot program provides an opportunity to closely monitor any unforeseen challenges and ensure that adequate resources are available and agencies are well prepared for any issues that may come up in wider implementation. In that spirit, a cornerstone of this pilot program is the robust collection of analysis and data in multiple areas to be designed and overseen by the Commission's research department. The Commission and each municipality and business that participates in the pilot program will agree to collect data, be anonymized, aggregated, and shared with the public. Specifically, pilot program participants will collect data on items including but not limited to product sales, serving sizes, staff turnover rate, municipal data, including cost, crime, and any incidents or complaints. I'm sorry, this was the recommendations from the working group. So my question is, could you share with us the details of your plan and approach to for ongoing data collection and analysis for this license type?
Sure, it's a great question, and thank you, Commissioner Roy. Obviously, that's a piece of what we want to look at. I mean, we already collect data from our existing licensees based on their sales. We collect other data, and Marianne Sarkis would be great, or Dr. Johnson would be great to help us understand all of the data collection, and that could be a component of building into our regulations. Again, I don't see it as attached or necessarily a fixture of the regulations or a fixture of the pilot program that we can't pull out.
Commissioner Ryan, any other questions or any other comments?
Yeah, what are your thoughts around zoning in other jurisdictions? Or I've heard anecdotally, if ventilation is not adequate, it could be issues for residents, whether they live above or around. So I just wanted to your thoughts around what your approach will be. I know there's local control, but we do talk to zoning in other areas of our regulations. So I just wanted to get your thoughts because it is a concern. That's a public health concern. So just your thoughts around zoning. Will it be all local control, or will the social consumption speak to that regulations?
Well, I think zoning is local control, so I don't think we have
I mean, buffer
necessarily a
zones,
say within that.
buffer zones.
I mean, there are some buffers that we already incorporate, right? 500 feet from, a school, certainly limitations on advertising. Again, local zoning is going to be local zoning. I think local zoning will follow what type of licenses we decide to make available. If something is completely, and again, a hypothetical to hopefully answer your question, if somebody only wants to provide edibles, then they're getting away from the air handling system requirements for vaping or smoking. And that would probably allow a community to make a separate decision based on the zoning for that. Obviously, there was also changes in Chapter 180 with respect to being able to smoke cannabis indoors. So this is all going to be folded into the regulatory work that we're going to look at. But, some of the zoning pieces of it are certainly going to be left to the local community.
Commissioner Roy, anything else right now, Commissioner?
I'm good right now. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins.
Commissioner Concepcion?
I have nothing to add. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
You don't have anything at this time? So in having some additional conversations, since we last talked about this, one of the things I started looking at is the, experience of other jurisdictions, in particular California, Colorado. And one of the things I was surprised to see is that Colorado, I think, has 5.7 million residents, and Massachusetts has, a little over 7 million residents. And that, is it true that Colorado has only 3 active on-site consumption? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because we're not, obviously Colorado geographically and sort of, it is different than Massachusetts in a lot of different ways. But what is it that you've learned from the rollout in Colorado that might be helpful to us here in Massachusetts to make sure that we're, I won't say getting it right, because I think it's hard to get this right, because it is kind of a, a new realm that we're working in right now. There's still a lot of unknown here. What have you gleaned from experience in other states about how they set this up and how things are functioning now?
Commissioner Camargo, you want to answer that first? I'm happy to add some comments too, but.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, great question. Thank you for asking. We're talking to a few jurisdictions. I think everyone is trying. Obviously, California has had a longer shot at it. Colorado, we had a great conversation with them recently, just about how their framework works. I won't get into it too much. I think the question here is sort of about the pilot, but they are trying to figure out for themselves within their framework what licenses, what license types do people want to see or are people applying for. So it's a little different for them. It's more of a framework versus a specific license. And, I think the challenge is that we already know when it comes to capital. Right?
Can I interrupt? Can you just explain what you mean by that? A framework versus, I don't know if I understand what you're saying. Could you tease that out a little?
Yeah. So the framework itself, the regulatory framework, sort of, they have a framework, sort of like what does it look like? What can you do? What can you not do? But they've really left it up to licensees within that framework to say, hey, I want to apply for a social consumption bus that will allow me to do a tour from, from the airport to this dispensary to then my hotel. So that's one sort of license type. They're actually open in Colorado, but that's them working with licensees to say, hey, what works best? You know, who are the applicants that are coming to apply for this type of license? But again, to your point earlier, capital is a big situation, right, in social consumption. Also, cities and towns are going to sort of are deciding what it looks like. I guess I'm only speaking for them in sort of like the high level, quick, you know, hour-and-a-half conversation we had with them. They're sort of their CCC, for lack of better words, is working with licensees to figure out within the framework what licenses work for them when it comes to equity, when it comes to depending what city in Colorado they're in. So it's very different, Madam Chair, to be honest, and we're still having conversations with all these folks, but it's very different per state, which has been very fruitful in terms of looking at what other states are doing. I think we're a little more privileged that we get to kind of already have been here for about 6 years and kind of work with our cities and towns to sort of figure out equity, our SEP program, our SEP, trust fund, our EEA program, our licensing, how we're already doing licensing, all the compliance that we have in place. So I think we have our own sort of framework, but we really got to figure out, sort of what's next. And there's a lot, like you said, this is very tricky. There's a lot at play, even within our social consumption group right now in terms of what does this look like? So that was a long-winded answer, but I guess we can give you more of that, down the line as well, because we're still talking to jurisdictions. There's a lot to read, and there's a lot of folks to have conversations with. And Commissioner Stebbins, I don't know if that was helpful or not, but you can add to it.
Yeah, if I can just add, again, we're reaching out to a number of jurisdictions, some more established than others. We've also had a conversation with Nevada, which is just rolling it out. I ran into some folks.
Can I ask, is Nevada doing anything outside of Las Vegas and Reno? How are they approaching it? I mean, again, and this is also when the question, I don't know if I heard the answer to my question, because this is sort of my dilemma between what is it and what is the framework, sort of understanding what all those potential licenses would be. I think also starts the conversation with municipalities. If I were the mayor of a city and I were worried about secondhand smoke and worker safety, you know what I mean? We know that that's an issue, and, we've been focused on worker safety. If I were mayor, I'd want to sort of understand all of what that means before I would want to take this to my community and seek approval, either from a town meeting or a, city council. So can you sort of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And again, as I said before, we're trying to get to creating which is really the licensing and regulatory framework. And that work really has just begun for us. Just reflecting on, again, talking to other jurisdictions, Nevada kind of made it available to communities and counties outside of Las Vegas. We have not circled, actually, when we talked to them, I think it was the day their applications were going live, so they're not as far along as Colorado and California and other jurisdictions. I ran into some people from Colorado at the NECAN conference in Boston. They voiced to me their frustration with how the Colorado social consumption program had rolled out. So as Commissioner Camargo said, we have a lot to learn, a lot of jurisdictions to talk to, and hopefully we're going to come up with that regulatory and licensing framework, which will work for Massachusetts and certainly work for the folks who are going to apply for a license type. And those are our SEP, EE, micro business, and grower cooperative applicants.
Yeah,
Commissioner Wright?
Chair.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly that the licensing types, the zoning, the air quality, all that stuff, trust me, it's probably keeping us up at night right now. But all that stuff will be addressed within the regs, right? I think we can continue to have conversation, and that's fine, but know that all that stuff will be discussed and is, we are thinking it through and we're trying to be very intentional. Madam Chair, you said it earlier in terms of thinking about, not creating extra barriers for some of these equity license types. So all that stuff will be in the regs, and I appreciate the conversation because it's stuff that we need to kind of come back to our group and really sort of detail, but just to keep us sort of focused. But I just wanted to say that really quickly.
Thank you. Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question and then a comment, and knowing that the Social Equity Fund will probably have around 15, maybe upwards to $20 million, and if we don't start this on some sort of limited capacity, knowing that an HVAC system can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, opening the floodgate, running before we walk, I'm just curious how that creates impact. And how folks, we all know capital is the barrier, right? It's capital, and we have limited capital here. And so how do we create impact? And secondly, my comment is around approach to this process. So, and each working group is so different, but I just want to share a little insight into our working group, which is the HCA working group. We statutorily have to create a model HCA, and halfway, not even halfway through the working group, I had brought up, well, should we start to tackle the model HCA? And the real seasoned experts in our group said, respectfully, Commissioner, no, we need to know what it is. We need to have it built out. We need the framework. We need to know what it is before we can turn to folks and say, here's a model HCA. So that'll be the last piece for us. An important part, which in the meantime, we will have public comment and we will have public hearing. And I think that's vitally important. So I guess I'm confused because I don't have enough information around public health, public safety, and to say that we should not walk before we run. And I just feel that we're taking kind of a different approach. We want to know what the it is before we put that in place. So I guess it's the approach is what I'm struggling with, because the it isn't there, and I don't know what parameters are taken around public health and public safety, and quite frankly, equity too. So it's all of that built in, which is where I still need more information around all of that. So it's, I guess, approach is partly what I'm wrestling with. Thank you for my time.
Commissioner Concepcion, couldn't tell. Did you have your hand up? Please, thank you.
I did.
Okay,
thank
thanks.
you so much. And thank you, Commissioner Stebbins and Commissioner Camargo, for the work that you've done in the presentation today. This is helpful. I share, the public safety, public health concerns, but I will highlight specifically around public safety. I just want to make sure that when the final recommendations are ready, that you guys are mindful and elicit, those stakeholders, members of law enforcement, to get that perspective, because this is it's a unique license type we're talking about now. It impacts so many others beyond just the consumer and the licensee themselves. It has the potential to have a really large community impact. So I would just be mindful of that. I think that the pilot program itself, you guys can still make sure that there are provisions and regulations in place to make sure that public health and public safety are top of mind, without necessarily having the pilot program. I do believe that I gather that from some of the conversation that we've had today so far. But I just want to say that now, just to make sure, because we need to have that conversation when we go towards the final finish line about what this actually looks like.
So I have another question. So,
Madam Chair.
again, oh,
Madam
sorry.
Chair.
Yes, sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to take an opportunity to respond to Commissioner Concepcion's points. Again, we will reiterate this. I think as a body, as a commission, our first and foremost focus is on coming up with that licensing and regulatory framework, which does promote public health, public safety, and equity. I will tell you, we've reached out to the Mass Chiefs. They're invited to have us to come in and talk to their group. And the listening sessions that we have planned, it's not only just for industry stakeholders, municipal officials, and we had a quick chat, Matt and I, last week with the MMA. They're going to put out the invite to all of their interested communities, but we'll also engage public safety and certainly public health officials. I know Commissioner Roy and I met with a group up in Franklin County a few months back. They gave us a statewide list of all these local organizations, and we want to make sure that they're heard from in this process as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Commissioner.
So you know, I know we're going to focus just on removing the pilot program. That's what we're being asked to do here today. And we have a lot of questions, and you're obviously still in the information gathering stage and hearing from stakeholders. Is there any possible alternative to the pilot program that allows us to walk first? What do you think about that? Like limiting licenses, or I mean, that would be my suggestion, that we take a very measured approach, measured in terms of understanding the limited financial resources that are there, making sure that the best possible business plans get the support of that social equity fund, and that the social equity fund has time to sort of absorb and not only maybe support existing licensees, but maybe expansion into this or newcomers into this. But are there alternatives to the pilot program that would allow us to make sure that this first cohort of social consumption licensees is successful? Because I'm mindful of the fact that there are more licensees right now facing, you know, going out of business, not having the resources. We've heard from a number of equity applicants who are chomping at the bit to get some of those resources to help them stay in business or continue to grow and stabilize their business. So what are the potential alternatives to a pilot program that could allow us to sort of walk first, assess how this is rolling out, and then make sure that we get it right the first time, if not the first and a half time? What might that look like, or have you considered that?
Yeah, I'll be happy to offer some thoughts, and then I'll invite my colleague Commissioner Camargo too also. Again, I hear you, and I hear all the concerns that you know, all of you are sharing with us, and they're all thoughts that our working group has taken to heart. Again, we didn't see a value to the pilot program in the way the pilot program was laid out. And also the fact that we think it does not align with what the legislature took up last year in Chapter 180. But I think, Chair, where you're going and what you're thinking about is how we want to approach this. We want to come up with those lucrative business types. We might even come up with business types that don't revolve a huge amount of capital that would bring the social equity trust fund back. We just don't know yet. And I think everything is on the table, but to have the room and the wherewithal to think through all of these options. And again, I'm looking to the listening sessions to give us a lot of insight. I'm looking to the survey to look at potential new business license type that we may not have even thought of. Again, I think we're handcuffed right now by the pilot program, but I think all of the concerns you raise are, you know, our entire working group is sensitive to all of those.
Commissioner Roy, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I can only speak to our group, when we fill in that template for policy recommendations. So we enumerated our policy recommendations, and then we gave alternatives. So instead of one or the other, this is kind of extreme. Yes or no? I would like to see alternatives as provided in the template that we received. So to Madam Chair's point, we can walk before we run. So do you have any alternatives to a pilot that you could share with us?
Well,
Go ahead, Commissioner
thank you.
Camargo.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Roy, and thank you, Madam Chair. I think when we take a step back, eliminating the pilot program and working with municipalities, right, to allow them to figure out if they want to opt in, I think is the first step, right? In terms of, Madam Chair, you and Commissioner Roy, you asked about alternative programs and what's the alternative. It's really leaving it up to the cities and towns right now to figure out if they want to opt in into social consumption once they see what we've worked on, once they see the regs. That's the big thing. Madam Chair, you talked about best business practices and sort of making sure that this is successful. Do we limit it to licensees? I think that if we limit it within the window of opportunity that we have right now, within the executive period, and just within the industry right now, in terms of the window of opportunity, if we keep the pilot, or we figure out, or we manage or have a cap on licensees, we ourselves as commissioners will be creating more barriers to the social consumption. It's been almost 6 years. We are compliance heavy in Massachusetts, and that's okay. We need it to be compliance heavy the first 5-6 years. There's stuff on the regs right now that we have to look at. I think all of you all know that low hanging fruit that we can sort of remove and kind of allow everybody to move forward. But we have a licensing process that's pretty rigorous. We get the hey, we're doing a great job, and we also get the complaints, right? We have a team of folks on compliance that are thorough in their investigations, right? Like, sometimes to the point where people get upset that, they're looking at this minutia thing, but it's in the regs and they're looking at it. So I think that, I know we're worried about walking or crawling before we walk, but I think that the CCC, the former commissioners, and our teams have put the regulatory stuff is in place, but we are enforcing these regs. When you look at these final, licenses,
but I don't mean to interrupt, but can I just I really just want to focus on, because I hear you on barriers, and I hear you that we regulate heavily, but what I'm trying to figure out is, this is unknown territory. This has public health issues, and so and there will be expense, and the biggest barrier, right? The biggest barrier is going to be getting resources. So there's going to be winners and losers. And so what I'm saying is, how do we make those winners as strong as they possibly can be? That's what I really want to focus on, because I'd like to vote to get rid of the pilot project. You've got me there, but how do I get to impact? How do I get to supporting the initial group that's going to have exclusivity and making sure they're successful?
I got it. And no, thank you, Chair. I know that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to just.
It's okay. It's okay.
Heart. Yeah. Sorry.
No. And I know we're virtual, so it's kind of funny when you're interrupting. So all good. But thank you for that. Thank you for sort of bringing it back. But I was just sort of, and to quickly finish my thought, I was just saying that I know that when we talk about success, there's a lot to it, right? Our compliance, our regs, our approach to this, how we're looking at this, the conversations, everything else. We're talking about the social equity, trust fund, and how does that play a role? We don't know yet how that's going to play a role. But in terms of your specific question, Madam Chair, when you say, how are we going to make this successful? How are we going to find those, the first phase of social consumption where we're going to, take care of public health, public safety, be innovative, find some, licenses that are lucrative, right? And that we're not going to have so much compliance that these things can't even happen. I think to your question and to your point is that we need to listen. We need to talk to other states. We need to talk to folks who have done this before. We need to work with our team. We need to work with you all, and all of us, right? Like every question that you have posed today, all of us, they're valid. We need to understand those. We need to really, look at those, and how to make these licenses successful is for us to figure out the approach, but also figure out not allowing the pilot program to move forward, but really allowing cities and towns. And I keep thinking about this. In my prior job, I worked with 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And, for some towns, there's one town administrator and, one other person, right? Having these cities and towns start thinking about hey, do we want to get involved in social consumption? That's going to allow our licensees to start thinking, hey, I do want to go to this town. I don't want to go to this town. So I think there's a lot of things that will play a role in us creating successful, licenses, but also that the licensees want to apply for this and will be successful themselves. And I think that all that approach is what we're thinking through, we're looking at within our social consumption group. And I think eliminating the pilot is the first step to making sure that folks can be successful, but still being cautious, in terms of public health, public safety, and working with everybody. So,
Commissioner Roy?
Commissioner Camargo, are you in support of a limited phase-in, or you just don't want any phase-in at all?
I'm in support of removing the pilot program.
No, but as an alternative, a phase-in, as the chair was asking.
I'm not. I don't think it's needed. I think we have all the guardrails in place. And there's more to come, though,
okay.
Commissioner.
So I guess what I struggle with is if we saw all the guardrails, we haven't seen the guardrails. We don't know what the guardrails are around public health and public safety. And just once we see everything, I guess I don't understand why this decision has to be made now and why it can't be made a little later down the process so we can see these guardrails. Because I don't know what they are, and I don't know. In RVT, is it license specific, like delivery? There's so many unanswered questions, and I don't know what the guardrails are. So I'm curious why this this question can't be posed to this group a little later down the process so we see that.
Let me jump in and hopefully I can answer your question, Commissioner. If we don't take the step of eliminating the pilot program, you're essentially, our working group is looking for a little bit of direction. Our suggestion is if you want us to go and work on the pilot program, that's step one, and that will take an extended period of time. We're saying right now, to help direct our work, we don't feel that the pilot program is needed as it's written. So help us take that work off our plate and allow us to focus on building out allow us to build out the legal and regulatory framework. And again, looking at the approach our working group is going to take, I think, Commissioner, you'll find we'll answer all those questions. We just don't have them now because we're trying to understand if we want this work to be taken off our plate. And our feeling is that eliminating the pilot program will help us dive in to building that licensing and regulatory framework.
Yeah, Commissioner Roy.
Yeah, I just, so if it's 12 licensees or communities or 20, wouldn't the guardrails be the same? Wouldn't it be the same approach to public safety and public health, whether it's 12 or 20? Or that's where I don't understand.
Commissioner Roy,
you just made a great argument as to why we don't need the pilot program. We're going to create those guardrails. We're trying to focus our work. And if the commission's decision is to focus on building out the pilot program, which we don't think is helpful, it allows us to focus our time on building out let us build out that licensing and regulatory framework. And this isn't the last conversation we're going to have about this. But we need to do our homework, do the outreach that we have planned. And again, if you look at our working group's kind of approach to this, I hope you'll see where our priorities are.
Yeah. Can I just say really quick, and Madam Chair, I'll throw it back to you, I think, but Commissioner Roy, and I just want to, sometimes we think and we say things and then we get quoted and it doesn't mean what we said. But when I said guardrails, I want to just let you know where my thought was. Those guardrails that you're talking about, exactly what Commissioner Stebbins said, we're still working on those. When I was talking about guardrails in my head, I was just thinking our licensing process, our heavy regs, our compliance, right? So I just want you to sort of have those two different sort of thoughts. We're still working on other guardrails, obviously, that we can't move forward without having those. And they involve public safety, they involve public health, they involve social justice, social equity. But when I think guardrails, I think about how heavy our compliance regs are right now, that they're already they're already tight, right? They're already creating some barriers for some things 5.5, 6 years later. So I just wanted to clear that so you sort of knew where my train of thought is, so that we don't use the guardrails as something completely else. But Madam Chair, I'll send it right back to you.
Commissioner Rowe, were you about to make another comment?
No, I just back to your earlier comment, Madam Chair, I would have loved to have seen some alternatives brought before us or recommended. It's all or nothing or one or the other. And I'm just wondering if there's something in between we're not thinking of or being, discussing.
Did Colorado or Oregon or Nevada, did they just open up everything statewide from the beginning? Because it surprised me that Colorado, which isn't too far off in terms of, total population, although obviously not as necessarily urban centric as we are, did they just open it up and all they got was 3, and maybe there are some additional applying, but they only got 3? Either Commissioner Stebbins, did they just open it up to the whole state? Did they have any sort of let's look and see? And when they opened it up, what were the guardrails? I mean, I know that we have a robust regulatory framework on licenses, but there will be other issues that we have to work on. We're going to have to work on the secondhand smoke, even though that is, we will have to provide leadership on that, even though a lot of that will be brought to the municipal level. I understand that. But I'm really thinking more, and I get boring, using the word impact. We have had over 800 people go through our social equity program. And right now, maybe we hit 52 today. Okay. But we only have 50 SEP, EEP, economic empowerment, those licensees. So I want to make sure that we don't create a false promise, and we don't at least maintain some ability to manage this rollout and leave it up to individual communities. I don't want to put a barrier in place. And again, I'm not wed to any pilot program. I just would like to have you guys thinking about, we don't know what it is yet. So before we get to it, I think we need to get to how. If we're not going to do a pilot program, I don't know if I understand how, and I don't think you know, because you don't know what it is yet. So I'd like to just throw that out there. Commissioner Concepcion, sorry, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Commissioner Stebbins, I don't want to cut you off. You had a comment that you wanted to
make. No, go ahead. I might be able to weigh in.
I just want to make sure my line of thinking is correct, because I feel like this is being framed as if without the pilot program, there's sort of this free-for-all that happens around social consumption. The way that I am understanding this is that we're giving municipalities, towns, and cities the ability to make a determination as to whether or not they are willing to opt in, want to opt in, have the logistics to opt in to social consumption. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I almost feel like we're having sort of a disconnect in what we're talking about and the framing of the situation at hand.
I don't think that we should have any say as to which communities opt in, but I think
that's
that
exactly
we should.
What
yes,
the
that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that I don't think that as I understand it, and I agree with you, Commissioner Concepcion, that we don't need to be limiting those communities to sort of get to the plate, right? They're going to get to the plate. They're going to look, they're going to understand the rules. They're going to figure out, we got like a timing on the clock and maybe that doesn't work. I don't know. These are really bad references in baseball and the only one who gets them is Bruce. But anyway, so I don't think that we should put that barrier in front of communities that want to explore. My only point is, and I'm a little broken record, but just making sure that we manage expectations. And I did see in one of the letters that maybe it's, the first X number of applicants that we give them priority in the licensure, or a priority within the priority. Because we don't know what some of those guardrails are. We don't know about health and safety. We don't know about secondhand smoke. There are so many
beyond this. You're thinking beyond the pilot discussion. You're thinking about now the framing and the crafting and drafting of what it ultimately will come to the table.
Right, because we don't know what it is yet. We don't know what it is yet, and communities don't know what it is yet. So they can't begin their planning process to accept what they don't know will be coming to their community. And that's the only reason I think we need to sort of figure out having a targeted, smaller cohort that we can do analysis with Dr. Julie Johnson, we can get feedback, we can be talking to the MMA and the individual communities and sourcing potential problems. And then we can very nimbly, although we know, I mean, I now know, I've never gone through a regulatory writing. This is not nimble, right? And so if we see problems, I mean, you know, some of us have had an issue with the 2-driver rule. You know, I did from the time I came in here, but we still don't have that written. And again, it's not anybody's fault. It's just we're doing, you know, a number of things. So that's, I'm going to broken record and I'm going to stop talking about that. But that's what I'd like to, that's what I'd like to see from you guys, because I don't think we need the pilot program and the barrier that you're talking about, but, you know, maybe giving us some sense of when you think you develop, what are the license types? You know, because then I think we have a more robust conversation with communities. We can have, you know, greater, you know, support from the Social Equity Fund, because is it going to be something that is indoors that's going to need $1 million HVAC system? Or is it just going to be a funk bus down in Provincetown, which would take me to the, you know, to the beach and let me have fun, you know, on a summer day? There are different impacts, but I don't know what that is right now, and I'm behind you. So, Commissioner,
I'm sorry if I'm understanding it correctly. This is the decision needed in order for you guys to continue on to that next step and framing. But okay, got it. Go ahead, Commissioner Stebbins. I think you might have.
Go ahead.
Say something. Yeah, no, and trust me, this this conversation is healthy. This conversation is good for all of us to know. And again, a lot of the questions you're raising as we build out the IT, and let's give the IT a new name. It is the Licensing and Regulatory Framework for Social Consumption. As we're building that out and we're going through the outreach and we're talking to other jurisdictions, I hope we'll be able to answer all of these questions for you. And again, we don't promulgate these regs without the 3 of you weighing in on a final product. But we need to start that work and move past the requirement of this pilot program, I think, to get us where we want to go. So I'm happy to make a motion if we're ready, but
all right, we have one more.
Commissioner Wright.
I just have a question for Commissioner Stebbins and Camargo. The chair brought up a targeted cohort, maybe having a targeted cohort, which I guess is different than saying what's in there now is limited municipalities. A targeted cohort would be by license type, correct, Madam Chair? By licensee, I mean, right. So how do you do that? How do you achieve that? And does that need to be before the IT? Does that option need to be explored? That targeted cohort for impact versus pilot program municipalities? And is that something to the commissioners on the working group, is that something you would entertain? And does that need to be baked in before the targeted cohort?
I'll answer. I think it's a good question. Again, all of these things are worth exploring, and this is good feedback and good direction for us to take. But getting us to focus on the licensing and regulatory framework, we can't do until we set the pilot program aside. But I hear you, Commissioner.
And I'm going to raise one point, and I'm going to put him on the spot here. Mr. Executive Director, do you have anything you would like to share with us, given your sort of broad national and international viewpoint on this? Put you on the hot seat here.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I've listened obviously to the discussion throughout. I understand that a lot of the substance still needs to be worked out. I appreciate that we are being informed by other jurisdictions, but as the conversation alludes to, I would not be in a place to argue or suggest that there is a blueprint or a template out there that the Commonwealth can just adapt to Massachusetts. And there's a number of reasons for that. For instance, there was some discussion earlier about Nevada. If I'm not mistaken, just this week, they are going to be revisiting some of their regulations on social consumption, including most specifically on ventilation. And obviously the challenges that operators are discovering there prior to even implementing or opening their doors to patrons. And I think that's obviously something worth paying attention to, where they came out with an early vision. As folks lived through that experience, they've then adapted and are starting to adapt their rules and requirements. And Madam Chair, I think you alluded to it as far as that nimble or agile approach that regulations lend themselves to. Certainly more nimble than say legislation, but nonetheless still a very public and deliberative process to change any regulation. So with that in mind, I don't have any strong recommendations for you outside of any process internally needs to get managed by our team. So any creation of a license type, I would just want to be in a position to come back to you at some future date with expectations, primarily around what does implementation look like. And that's really on the admin side of rolling out a new application type and things of that nature. You mentioned earlier Colorado. I think they've had sort of starts and stops to their program historically. For instance, at one point in the earliest days in the city and county of Denver, that consumption establishment had to be tied directly to a retail facility, but they were not authorized to sell other things, and also including not authorized to sell cannabis. So it ended up that those retail establishments were actually subsidizing that consumption aspect. And it's hard to turn a profit and pay significant rents in a downtown Denver setting when you're selling essentially bags of chips and other not so profitable goods or wares. Other jurisdictions, obviously California has very strong local control as far as their consumption is concerned. So each jurisdiction, be it even neighbors, San Francisco, Oakland, they're next door neighbors, but two different types of programs, and not a strong central state-based regulatory scheme, but also developing and evolving as a regulatory jurisdiction. At first, California started with 3 different agencies at the state level overseeing the cannabis program. So certainly you had your product manufacturing and your cultivation, but then retail was housed within the alcohol regime. And obviously, again, evolution has occurred there. So as I look across the country, and Michigan's another example where very, very small market as far as consumption is concerned. And again, just reviewing the landscape across the country, I can't point to a specific jurisdiction and say that is the model. And I don't mean that in any pejorative way. What I'm saying is every state is wrestling with this just the same way as we are. And obviously, I'm optimistic or hopeful that states will continue to look to Massachusetts, not just for whatever we roll out, but also this discussion today, frankly, to see how it's not messy. It's just it's complicated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Director. Commissioner Roy.
Mr. Executive Director, thank you for that. And you bring that unique perspective from CANRA. And can you talk about any of the public health, public safety issues some of the mature social consumption states have faced? And do you know what they've done to address it?
I can try. I think, and I know I'm fairly confident too that the working group that we've established is wrestling with these very issues too. Ventilation is clearly a concern if there's going to be combustion of any kind involved. And when I say combustion, I'm not just talking about, say, smokable flower, but also things like vaporization, aerosolization that may just emit something into the air. The legislature in Massachusetts did carve out from the smoke-free workplace cannabis as far as the cannabis consumption in lounge or venue settings. But it also then designates that the commission can designate combustion areas. So that's certainly, I think, a public health concern that is to be considered, not just for the patrons, but also for the staff that are working there for some prolonged manner. There were instances, I believe, in California where there was a limit on how long a patron or customer or patient could be there. Again, so as to try to limit any risk of prolonged exposure, but also to try to diminish the risk of impairment. Obviously, knowing that products themselves have certain delayed effects. So again, a smokable flower may, or even vapes, may take on an effect early on, immediately following consumption. We know that edibles take a bit longer to hit one system and then create that impairing effect. Other concerns relative to public health, certainly, again, dosing and how do you dose properly based on body composition. And then how do you know what impairment is? Knowing that there's tolerance that can be built up as well. Some patients, just to medicate, do require more product, a higher dose or more concentrated dose than others. And so that's how do you essentially, I'll use a law school analogy of the eggshell plaintiff. You take your customer or your patient as they are. You may not know their circumstances. You also don't know where they came from prior. That's a really hard burden to place on a licensee. We see that often in alcohol, for instance, where a patron may visit, say, a bar or a restaurant. You don't know where they came from. And so that puts a large burden on the bartender in that instance, or the waiter in that instance. So you want to make sure that the bud tenders or other operators are mindful of what those impairment signs are. Massachusetts as well, and I'm deviating a little bit from public health here, but Massachusetts has very diverse geographic settings. And we know that, for instance, our metropolitan centers, Boston especially, has at least access to a transportation system through the MBTA, and also probably a larger availability of ride shares, so Uber, Lyft, etc. However, there might be an attraction, say, in the summer months for Cape Cod and the islands to include a venue of this nature, but what availability is there for, again, either public transportation or access to ride share, or other means, frankly. And also, we do know that there are concerns relative to this being a very legitimate social justice, social equity component for patients as well, as far as a safe place in a legal space to consume, and what is the proximity of these facilities going to be. I think it would be a missed opportunity, frankly, and this is my personal opinion, for the commission to authorize social consumption, but then have access deserts, say, around public housing. Now, that said, you don't want to locate necessarily or limit the ability of these facilities to locate just within proximity to public housing, but it would be a missed opportunity if access is not granted to those facilities or to those communities, frankly, in those locations. So as far as other public health concerns, I know, for instance, and this is I'm throwing it back a little bit to some dated years. I had previously worked on legislation relative to wine to go. They called them wine doggy bags at the time. And it allowed customers or customers of restaurants, if you purchased a bottle of wine but did not want to consume it, you created really a disincentive or risk, which was if you paid for that bottle of wine, you were more likely to then drink the entirety of it. But that obviously created a heightened risk for impairment. So what the legislature authorized was, if the restaurant allowed for it, was that bottle of wine could be recorked and then sealed in a bag and taken with you, which then discouraged overconsumption. I haven't seen it in large practice in Massachusetts, but it is legally authorized. That would be something I think worth consideration here, where if someone purchases a product, they're not obligated or feel any burden to consume the entirety. For instance, let's use edibles as the example. A single package may have 20 servings. Our manufacturer is going to create social consumption specific products that may include, say, up to 2 or 5 servings, or is it going to be the standard fare 20 servings, 100 milligrams per product? And how do you accommodate that open container that may appear in a vehicle or something of that nature? So again, not so much a public health risk, aside from the risk of overconsumption if you don't authorize that to-go aspect. So a lot to unpack, and I apologize for the rambling answer, meandering answer, but those are things that I've seen across the country. And also, again, trying to analogize it to alcohol, that should be at least front of mind for our team. And I know that they are.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from any of the commissioners? So, Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure, Madam Chair, happy to make the following motion. I move that the CCC direct legal staff to take the necessary steps to remove 935 CMR 500.050 6A and B and related mentions of the social consumption pilot program through the appropriate regulatory process. Additionally, the staff shall take the necessary steps to rename 935 CMR 500.050 6 as social consumption license.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? The only comment that I will make is I am going to vote in favor of this, but I strongly suggest that during this continuing process that I think that there were still some unanswered questions about how we manage the rollout of this. And so I would just request that that be front and center, because I still think that there are a lot of unanswered questions. So that's my only comment. So with that, having been moved and seconded, I will take a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
And before I comment, Chair, I want to say I hear you, we hear you, and there's a lot of questions. So we will take all that into consideration. My vote is aye.
Thank you. And you have the hardest job, so thank you. Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
I just want to make a comment before my vote that I appreciate this conversation today. I appreciate your openness to alternatives. That, you know, other license types, sometimes even the best things done with the best intentions can go awry. Whether it's the delivery operator, which was done with the best intentions, right, to remove barriers and to help people and create equity, is problematic. Micro businesses were a license type that was done with the best intentions. Craft cooperative farmers, same thing. And these have either not worked or struggled, or they're failing. So having said that, and wanting to learn more what a targeted cohort would look like, and not having enough information around public safety, public health, and equity, quite frankly, and impact, I'm going to vote present. And I'm voting present because I need to learn more, know more about these impacts. So I'm eager to hear more, and congratulations, you have your votes, but I am eager to hear more, and I will be self-imposed guardrail, and I will vote present, and just because I don't have enough information to make what in my own capacity a full decision. So present it is.
Thank you. Commissioner Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, let me just add, appreciate the thoughtful conversation. Appreciate you here sharing all of your ideas and your thoughts. Again, the open meeting law is clunky, and this is the only time we really have to do that. So I appreciate it and appreciate everybody's input. But I will vote aye, Madam Chair.
Okay, I vote aye. Let the record reflect that the vote is 4 in favor, 1 votes present. Now we will move on to the municipal equity memo. Commissioner Concepcion and I have been leading that group. I begin by just sort of restating the fact that our group has been in response to Chapter 180. Our group has been working on figuring out ways that municipalities can incorporate equity into the host community agreement awarding process, making sure that it is open, making sure that it is transparent, making sure that communities consider equity when they are scoring and assessing the different potential businesses that may come to their community. Chapter 180 sort of set a little bit of a challenge for us. We have until November 9th to complete these regulations, basically telling communities what they must do. But as of July 1st, communities are under a statutory requirement that they must start, quote, considering equity in this host community awarding process. So we have sort of split the baby a little bit. So we're still working on those regulations, but we're getting to the tail end of that. And hopefully that'll be in the next, week or so that we will have that done. But that doesn't give municipalities a lot of time to start complying with the regulation as of July 1st. So what this memo is basically a set of best practices that we have observed to promote equity, to promote transparency, to promote fairness within that process. We've given some good examples that communities can follow in doing this. And again, we will be figuring out the sort of regulatory oversight, because that is a little bit unclear right now in terms of the sort of, there are carrots, there are additional amounts of money that will be available to communities that do have equity retail licensees within their community, but there are also penalties for failing to incorporate equity into that host community agreement and zoning process. So, I'd like to open it up to my colleagues. Perhaps Commissioner Concepcion, you can sort of add on to it. Commissioner Concepcion, being the better lawyer of the two of us, has been handling the regulatory writing stuff, and I've been working with the group to kind of come up with this memo, which is a little bit broader with less teeth. So, would you like to make a comment, Commissioner Concepcion?
I would. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you. And as you alluded to, there's a lot of work in this, and I just wanted to thank you and the members of the team that really put in a lot of thought and perspective and their time with the memo. I just want to reiterate a few different things and sort of lay out sort of what this conversation is. So it's really a starting point and an opportunity for the full commission, for us all here today, to weigh in on what was created and to finalize the memo. This was specifically created for host communities to prepare for the anticipated changes to the Cannabis Control Commission regulations. And it doesn't void other resources that were previously created and that are currently available right now by us here at CCC. So I wanted to just make sure that that was clear and clarify that this is the purpose of this is for host communities to really get a handle on what sort of changes they can anticipate. And the reason why this memo is coming out today and while we're expediting it is because under Section 25 of the new law, municipalities have a July 1st deadline to establish initial equity procedures and policies. So this is a guideline. It's guidelines to help municipalities as regs are being developed. And it doesn't include every consideration that will ultimately be formulated within the regs. We have a lot that we are sort of combing through and developing, and it goes beyond. So it's not all encompassing this memo. The regs will contain additional provisions as well. I also wanted to highlight a few other things. There are a few quality control matters within the memo. There are a few grammatical and factual errors, a couple, but I wanted to make sure that the comms team also got their hands on this and sort of made those edits prior to its official release. And I know that we have Chief Cedric Sinclair, our Chief of Communications, and Director Celia Williams available during this meeting. And I just want to make sure that they're on deck because I do plan to ask them for their perspective during this conversation. And with that said, Madam Chairwoman, I give it back to you.
Would you like to raise those questions now?
No. I'll hold off until we sort of, the other commissioners can sort of weigh in and ask their questions, and I will eventually.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Hope that you've had an opportunity to read the memo. It's fairly short, and I think that it covers a lot of important things that communities can be doing. But any questions or comments, Commissioner Concepcion?
Madam Chair, I spoke too soon. Actually, this might be a good opportunity to have Chief Sinclair sort of give some added perspective. I know there are a couple things that, there are a lot of things that impact his team and the social equity programming team as well. So maybe because I see you on the screen as well, I'll give Cedric the opportunity to kind of, one of the specific questions I had was around the memo speaks to guidance being provided by the CCC around eligibility. So if someone has a question around eligibility, whether or not they will qualify as being an equity participant or EEA, I wanted to give you an opportunity, Cedric, to sort of weigh in on sort of added perspective on that component of the memo.
Sure. Thank you so much, Commissioner Concepcion. So there's, as you mentioned, there's a few pieces of feedback that the entire communications team, including our copywriter and others, may want to provide some additional edits and perspective and make sure everything is factually accurate. But for today's conversation, I think the equity program and community outreach team is really looking at two aspects of the memo, and it really is in reference to the line you noted that directs municipalities to reach out to the team for verification of people who have gone through our equity programming, but I think more specific to this discussion, people who may qualify for the equity program. We could really use some clarity on if the latter or the former is the precise intention here. I think there are some significant differences for how the team would approach this kind of work, really looking at the idea of a year-round review or verification and trying to understand, would the relationship be with the prospective equity participant or the municipality? As the memo reads today, it sounds like it would be with the municipality, and there's just some considerations I would hope the agency would take. Primarily, I think it would be a more equitable pathway for the relationship to be with the participant. We really have a long queue of constituents who want to know, do they qualify for the program? How can they qualify for the program? And so if we're going to do that work, I want to make sure we're supporting our equity participants so they're in control and power of their status or their potential status. It also ensures that the agency's values and interpretation of equity is at the forefront of that review, and it really limits duplicative efforts. Really thinking about if an applicant or potential participant is shopping for HCAs in multiple jurisdictions, the commission, as it's currently set up, may receive outreach from 2, 3, 4 communities on behalf of one participant, instead of doing that verification for the participant and giving them the materials to verify themselves as they go to the various municipalities. The other piece is really around the operational aspects and its impact on staffing resources. Human resources would need to be assessed and likely adjusted to ensure our ability to effectively support this potentially new function. We've gone through 3 cohorts of SCP application review. Whether you're talking about this idea of could they qualify for our equity status, it's the same review as though we would actually get them into the program. And we're well versed with what that takes. Traditionally, we've had to borrow resources from other departments, and it's a thorough documentation review in most cases that requires some back and forth with the participant to understand their years in various DIAs or their narratives around any queries. Additionally, it misses, as the memo is currently laid out, we miss an opportunity to really utilize guidance documents, FAQs, and other website materials that allow municipalities to understand what those qualifications are today. And then I think the last piece that the team really talked through is that just influx of review, whether it's through a municipality or with the participants directly. It's going to have a impact on those human resources, and we're just not resourced in a way today to take that on without potentially tabling other priorities such as strategic planning, the development of our awareness materials, or ongoing cohort support.
Thank you, Cedric.
Commissioner Concepcion, do you want to respond to any of that? I mean, do you want to?
I'll let you respond first, because I think there were some drafting questions, and then I can add in.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think that one of the things that we are looking at is making sure that we don't unduly burden municipalities, and that we are the agency that's properly, sort of suited to make some of these determinations. We felt that in going forward, that one of the things that would help reduce barriers to equity applicants is to do, and Cedric, you had mentioned folks, looking at several jurisdictions, whether or not we would, as we do with the drivers, the delivery services, provide pre-certification so that an equity applicant has a lowered barrier to be able to go to a community to say, I would be, a good business person. Here's one hurdle that I've already gotten over. I certainly think that, and I think that frankly, overall, I think that this is one of the things that we do need to do as an agency 5 years in, is looking at the resources we have, looking at the manpower and woman power that is deployed, and whether or not it's properly promoting the equity mission that we have. And so I do think that, to clarify, I do think that this is something that we should take on as a commission, because I don't think that leaving this up to the communities is going to be easy. But one of the conversations that we've had is that, we've already had people who've gone through these programs, and so they will have proof, I believe, that they can provide to a municipality, and maybe we can make that list available on a website. I don't know. But I do think that of those 800 people that have, 900 that have sort of gone through these programs, that should be easy enough. And frankly, I don't think that this is going to be a significant new cohort of people. I mean, obviously, there will be different people looking at social consumption depending on when we get that done. But I do think that this will require making sure that there is enough staff support for this. I do think that it lowers a barrier for equity applicants to be nimble in, seeking those communities that A, give them, a hearty welcome, and B, making them look more attractive to both those communities, but also make them look more attractive to potential investors. So I hear the team, and I hear the, the concern about that, but I do think that this is something that we think reduces a barrier that's worth something. Commissioner Concepcion, and then Cedric.
Yeah, so I'll add to that as well. Cedric, it sounds like your read of the memo is a little bit different from our intention behind it, because you made a comment about municipalities sort of having that eligibility information. And so a prospective licensee would need to do it multiple times based on each municipality. The thought process and the idea is that the individual is able to have their eligibility determined by the CCC and not through the municipality. So that might be a matter of just the wording and the framing. But to the chair's point, so the idea, and now that we have a full commission, we can sort of talk about what we've been thinking about and developing in the municipal equity working group. And so there are two separate things. One is under the new law, if you are eligible for our SCP program or the EEA, you are then eligible for equity, any sort of equity provisions or regulations or programs that are developed by municipalities. So it goes a little bit beyond what we actually have here at the CCC. We at the Cannabis Control Commission, we usually only have it based on those who've been accepted and kind of go through our social equity program or who have been certified as EEA. So what we have done, or what we're developing right now through the working group, is the CCC will now determine, or the idea is to determine if someone will be eligible or can be eligible for the SCPs, for the social equity program. And with that determination, the individual can then notify the municipality, and the municipality knows that this person is then, can go through a HCA process, can go through whatever other resources that they make available in terms of equity for equity applicants, because we've deemed them eligible. We've said that they fit the criteria that we have set here at the Cannabis Control Commission for, social equity. And we all know in order to go through our social equity program, you need to either be from a disproportionately impacted area, you need to have, or you have to have a prior conviction or have a close family member who has a prior conviction on their records. The other is through the EEA, if you are someone who's been certified or an entity has been certified as economic empowerment. And the other thing that we're developing is pre-certification. And so the idea is to have a pre-certification for all equity applicants, not just for delivery or social consumption, but equity. So those are people who have gone through the social equity program or who are EEA. And that's a little bit different. So I just wanted to make sure we're clarifying that there are two different buckets, and I can answer any other questions. I can kind of get in the weeds here, as you can tell. Cedric, I don't know if that answers all your questions. I think you had a few, but in terms of if the individual or the municipality has control of that eligibility determination, it's the individual.
So we just would then need to make some simple updates to the memo. Currently, it reads, if you need to verify whether someone participated in or would qualify for the social equity program. So I think it would be as simple as striking or would qualify. And then we can provide, we can work with the executive director to make sure the verification process for those who have already been accepted is something that can be executed within a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I know that you've worked on this with your team, so thank you for thinking this through. I know this is not easy. I know that everyone's nervous about the July 1st date, and we want to get something out. Cedric, it's good to see you. Thank you for bringing this up, because I'll be honest, I read this memo about 3 times, and I'm always thinking operationally. And we don't have all the information of what you guys are working on. So I I know how you all feel on the social consumption side, right? Because not all the information's there yet. But, you know, I read this. And so a couple of things for me. I think one is, you know, there's some information on here. I think Commissioner Conversión, you said it already, some things that need to be sort of cleaned up, some typos and some numbers in terms of the data that's on here. But also, the operationally, I couldn't understand from reading the memo how that verification would work for cities and towns when we already have a verification for social equity applicants. So I think this sort of answers the question, but if I can put it in a practical way. So I am not, let's say I'm not a social equity applicant right now, but I am now looking to start a business, and I'm going to go to the city of Boston. But the social equity program hasn't opened up yet, so I haven't applied. I don't have my certificate. So what you guys, are you trying to say that basically I will go to the city of Boston and start my application process, but somewhere in there say, you know, hey, I've talked to the CCC. I am going to qualify for SEP once it opens, and I'll have my certification. Therefore, I'm equity right now. So how would it operationally work on a local level? So that's one.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, well, that's one question I have about the memo, and then I have something else, but go ahead. If I don't know, the chair or.
I was making sure if it's okay if I take it.
Please go ahead,
Chair.
Commissioner. Yep.
So it's a change to the law. So what we're doing is we're addressing the change to the law. Under the law, I don't even want to paraphrase.
I think you said it earlier.
I know I was paraphrasing, but it changes it. So a social equity business under Chapter 180 is a marijuana establishment with not less than 51% majority ownership of individuals who are eligible for the social equity program or whose ownership qualifies it as an EEA.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing is we're addressing that change.
Mm-hmm.
Municipalities under the law will have to have equity provisions in place that support social equity businesses. So an individual who has not gone through or been accepted to our social equity program could still be deemed a social equity business under the law because they're eligible. And that's why I went through the eligibility requirements about being from a disproportionately impacted area, about convictions, so on and so forth. That's why it's a little different. So technically speaking, someone would have access to local benefits, but might not necessarily have access to our benefits under the social equity program because they're not one and the same.
So how do we do that? So how do you guys envision that operationally? So if I'm just reading this as I'm a town manager and I don't know, some city out there, you know, how does that work operationally? Because from reading this, and I know Cedric, you said strike or would qualify, but I don't know if it's clear on the memo to town administrators. And again, I'm just thinking, you know, our big cities and towns understand this, but I'm thinking about the cities that, you know, are still sort of working in, you know, the industry. But Chair, I know it seems like you have.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't think that given what the statute says that we can strike that language, because the statute says are eligible for, not have gone through. And so I think operationally 2 things. I think we need to beef up our website to make sure that a community can easily find a list of those applicants that we have already deemed eligible, and we have already run them through the program, or not run them through, but given them access to the program. So that I think is something that operationally that we could do via our website. And then I think we're going to have to figure out, you know, the person power it would take to help those communities determine who those eligible would be. And I think that we're the best suited to do that. So Cedric, I saw you had your hand up. So
Sure. I just want to provide a bit of context about the folks who have already been qualified and accepted into the program. It is somewhat intentional that there's not a specific web page listing their names and contact information today. We have done that with our EEA status, and we have done that with a cohort of SCP after a public records request, I believe. Anecdotally, we do have some participants who are resistant to having their names associated publicly. I do believe our review has been that it would generally be considered a public records. It would be considered a public record. However, in response to providing some sensitivity, because we may have a high-level VP at insert XYZ corporation who does not want the visibility that they are looking at a federally illegal industry. And so we typically have provided proactive notice to those participants before sharing their contact information. So I think we would just want to talk that through. Don't think it would be a major challenge. We may opt to do a opt-in process so that you can decide if you want your name publicly accessible. But those are just some considerations I would recommend.
Okay, but again, I think that those are the devils are in the details, but these are details that are easily, you know, fairly easily worked out. And that we can, you know, make this available to, I mean, basically, you know, literally just a yes or no email from us. Either they're in or they're out, or the third answer, they're either in or they're out in the program. And if they're not in the program, then we're going to have to figure out what that review process would be that they would go through, even if there's no active cohort, what they would do to qualify for that. So again, we're not saying that this is not without some, you know, burden, you know, upon our team, but we think that this is, you know, where it properly rests, rather than having individual municipalities come up with, you know, those definitions, and maybe they get it right and maybe they don't. So, but Commissioner.
I'm sorry, I still have a part of a question for you, Chair. You did mention
sure.
that you didn't think we could strike or would qualify, but that's the part that would qualify is a substantive review. It takes significant time. So if we're unable to strike that from the memo, we are essentially setting a public expectation for municipalities that the agency is not operationalized to support today.
Currently, no.
Can I ask Cedric to clarify? You're saying that is a concern for the memo, but ultimately, when the regs come out, it's a little bit you want sort of a buffer period.
So during the regs, my understanding is we would have implementation work to identify what are the resource impacts, what are the financial impacts. That's when we would be able to operationalize this piece. If we're releasing the memo with the expectation that this is operationalized by July 1, outside of identifying those who have already been accepted, that would be a challenge.
I get it now. Okay, I agree.
Yeah, I thank you so much. I get it too. I was so lost in the sauce on this one. I'm glad we're having the conversation. Sorry, Madam Chair, I kind of just
no, thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yep. I haven't. Can I ask?
Please go ahead. Yep,
Okay. One, thank you for that, because, you know, again, I'm just thinking about when this lands, you know, and Sean Collins says this all the time. Whatever we put out as a memo or as guidance is Bible for the industry and for cities and towns. So for them to get a memo, you know, from us before the next, you know, few weeks, it's a big deal. So I think, you know, really looking at every sentence. So my other question or recommendation is on page 3. Let's see. No, page 4. So I know we talked about, not we, but you all, so thank you, municipalities that are doing some of the work. I know we noted Newton and Somerville, but I wanted to just recommend as well. I know that we had worked on the guidance for municipal equity resources, and it is on our website, but I also, you know, there's just some stuff here, again, that could probably just be taken, sort of cut and paste. And the only reason I guess I'm recommending it is One, because the memo is going to these cities and towns, it's going to be front and center. They're going to be able to look at this. They're going to kind of really highlight this for the next few weeks. But, we talk about cities and towns could consider encouraging increased participation in the local cannabis ecosystem by offering equity applicants the following incentives. So reduce community impact fees, exclusive access to host community agreements, expediting the zoning and permitting process, offering technical assistance. So those are just 4 bullets that if you want to add them, you can. I recommend. They're very helpful to see them front and center. But then also, as of February of last year, we have the city of Boston, and the city of Boston requires the approval of equity applicants on a one-on-one basis with general applicants. That's a big deal for equity. The city of Boston has also implemented a cannabis equity program. So that's another point there. Cambridge, the city of Cambridge has incorporated an equity exclusivity period for licensee adult use marijuana establishments. The town of Lee reviews marijuana establishments' community impact costs annually. And if the town incurs no cost, licensees are exempt from paying the community impact fee for that year. And I know that's for all licensees, but for equity licensees, that makes a huge difference. So I think bringing that to the forefront again in the memo could be helpful. The town of Newton, you guys already have it on here. And Northampton, the city of Northampton has eliminated all community impact fees for marijuana establishments. Again, it helps everyone in the industry, but particularly, I think it'll give that, that leg up to equity applicants. And obviously Somerville, you all have it on here. But so I just wanted to really encourage you to sort of look at these and be able to add them to the memo. I think it'll give it a little bit of more meat. But overall, I think I know what you're trying to do. I see what the working group is trying to do. And again, I just think that this memo coming from the commission is so key. And if we could put it on here and not have them have to sort of go to a link to see some of this that we've already worked on, I think would be helpful. And I think Commissioner Concepcion, you said it earlier, or somebody mentioned it, but definitely run it through our copywriter, Nadine. I think she's great at what she does, and I think it'll be helpful. I know we were trying to just get it in to be able to review it, but I would recommend that. So kind of just thoughts. I'm happy to drop the information that I'm talking about for you all to sort of look at it. But I think it will be helpful for the memo.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And I think that where we really are in this is trying to get something done quickly while we get something done more, impact. We've been going back and forth a little bit, around sort of some communities like Boston that have dozens of applicants are in a different, place than maybe a smaller community like my hometown of Whitman, that it was late to the game. They had not, passed cannabis until, last year, and basically have 3 applicants. We were trying to sort of balance the sort of good examples in those larger urban areas, but also making sure that it made sense for the smaller communities that, frankly, we've talked about this before, disproportionately impacted areas. There are some small communities, that trying to hire people, from DIAs is geographically very difficult. So trying to make sure that this passes muster for maybe the larger communities that may not have, fully embraced this, like a Malden or a Lawrence, but also making sure that we take into consideration the smaller, more rural areas. So those ideas are not included and may well be included in the next go round. It's just we're trying to this is the sort of walk before they run, getting folks to walk. But I certainly think that we can take your suggestions and see if there might be some additional examples to put in there. So I appreciate the comment. Yeah. Commissioner Concepcion, then Commissioner Roy.
I'll just add, Commissioner Camargo, thank you. Thank you for bringing up those other cities and towns that are doing some really, really phenomenal work in terms of equity. I think our thinking was, the purpose of the memo was to give municipalities sort of some insight into the direction where we're going in the regs. So I'm not opposed to sort of adding some additional towns and municipalities, but I guess my line of thinking was just, I want them to see what we've flagged in order to anticipate where we're going. Boston, the 1-to-1 ratio is phenomenal, but I don't really know if that is something that smaller towns can actually do in a way that's successful and doesn't create a bottleneck. So that's been a part of the conversation as well. So I don't want to indicate that we're going in that direction when in actuality that's not what will come with the regulations, at least the draft that we're preparing. So that was a thought process. I'm not saying, we don't add them to it, but that was sort of the rationale.
Yeah, that's, Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure, please.
Yeah. Thank you for that breakdown, Commissioner. That's interesting. So, I hear you. I hear what you guys are saying. Again, it's so hard, right? Because we're not in your working group. So I appreciate the train of thought. And I guess I'm thinking about all cities. So I guess how you're breaking it down and where the regs are going, I get it. And again, it's a suggestion. It's already in one of our documents. I just think that this memo is so important. And I know you guys have been thinking about it, that having something there front and center, because there's some small towns, but there's still some other towns that are comparable to a Lee or to a Northampton or Cambridge, in Western Mass that may not go into a document and may not see that, Lee's doing this or Northampton.
And by the way, Lee isn't. They're just looking at all. It has nothing to do with equity. It's all just looking at their impact. You know what I mean?
No,
but we think
great.
that all communities should be doing that, but we're not on that working group.
Right. Yeah.
So those issues, are may well be, as we know, social equity and the host community agreement. There's a little bit of overlap and a little bit of sensitivity to who's doing what, and I think that in combination, we'll be able to implement, some more of these things. So I'm just going to let Commissioner. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Camargo.
No, I'm just going to quick follow-up question. When do you? I know that this is the first time that we're having the conversation, and you guys are all getting feedback, and we're listening to this for the first time. And I know we have a due date. What is your anticipation? I know our next meeting is 2 weeks from now. Mm-hmm. So are you hoping to kind of clean this up and bring it back to the next meeting for a final vote?
Again, I guess we have to clean it up. I thought that the communications team had time to look at this, and so these are the first substantive edits that I've heard. So I was hoping we would get a vote today because I'd like to be able to get this to communities. But if we don't have the vote today, we can do it at the next meeting. Commissioner Roy.
Thank you. I just want to thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Concepcion, for all your hard work and the thought that went behind this. And I'm excited being on the HCA working group when these two concepts merge and marry together. Once our legal team gets a hold of both of them. And so thank you for that. I'm excited to see when they're melded together. And I just have a suggestion, and forgive me if I missed it. Would it be helpful in the memo to remind folks of the carrot and the stick that is in statute?
We put the carrot in. The carrot's in,
but I think maybe sometimes
we got to put
it's
the stick there
helpful
too.
to remind folks of the
Yes.
stick, and it's in statute. So it's not like we made up the stick or created the stick. The stick is in statute. So I think it just might be helpful as a gentle reminder to maybe list the stick.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. You know what? We actually considered that, and I don't think we made that change. We definitely put the carrot in. We need to put the stick in as well. So, and we were also going back and forth a little bit because we don't necessarily have the direct ability to do that. And so this is actually one of the problems that we have, based on what the legislation said. You have the Cannabis Control Commission where we think we're going to be enforcing this stuff, but we aren't explicitly. And we've actually had some conversations as to whether or not we need the Mass Municipal Lawyers Association, raise that sort of control and oversight issue. So, perhaps we may need some cleanup legislation that clarifies things, or at minimum, we need to be working with the Treasurer's Office, the Department of Revenue, to see how the complementary language in a couple of different statutes allows us to oversee and then work with the Department of Revenue for both of those carrots and those sticks. So thank you for that commentary. There's still a lot of missing pieces, in there. Executive Director Sean Collins, there you go.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to perhaps offer a suggestion or a strategy that might accomplish a lot of the what sounds like shared objectives or goals here. Is I understanding, excuse me, that you'd like to, if possible, get as close to closure today. One approach may be to approve the memo as a general concept, pending those updates or edits for publication, authorizing me and the staff to make those changes. Obviously, again, recirculating it to commissioners to confirm it is consistent with your intent. And then if it's not, we can always bring it back for reconsideration to the commission. If not, we could button it up, punch it up, and probably share it with communities in advance of your June 8th meeting. So if we can shave off that time, that would be, I think, a valuable benefit to the communities. However, if I can't get to closure, I certainly won't. And would probably return it to the commission for your final consideration. But there might be a middle ground to approach this. Again, thus hopefully allowing a vote today for your, given the timing, that's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you, Sean.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll thank the Executive Director. First of all, thank you, Chair and Commissioner Concepcion and your working group for doing all this work. I enjoyed reading through it. My apprehension at first was, are some of the stipulations or some of the elements of the plan, understanding this tight time frame that our communities will be up against, are they going to be kind of business and eco dev strategies for everybody? But I was happy to see that their business and economic development strategy recommendations, specifically, it appears, towards our SEP and EE applicants. On top of that, I think you folded in some interesting suggestions that are more kind of cannabis related. You know, the reduction of fees, things like that. So I'll put it. My next point is I'm happy to kind of give you all a green light and a go ahead, because I think, as the Executive Director suggested, we got to move this along. And I think there's enough here with some trust you to do the final touches on the document, but to get it out the door, get it in the hands of the community that are going to need as much time as possible. Understanding, or it's my understanding, that these recommendations or a plan to be submitted by communities by this upcoming deadline is in effect a placeholder until additional regulatory work gets done.
Yes.
And I think I would, and I'll ask this question while I have you all here. Are there opportunities to build into municipal equity some components around folks looking for work? Is there a worker opportunity here? Are there opportunities for, I'm just thinking of our other cohort, if you're in the ancillary track, and you might have that plumbing business, can we treat that plumbing business the way we treat a cannabis business as they were going through the local zoning or approval process? So again, there's probably more talk about that to hit the next deadline, but I'm comfortable enough with what you have here that, you know, with some kind of last fine tuning, it should go out the door as soon as we can.
Commissioner Stebbins, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Madam Chair.
No, you go ahead. You're there first. Go ahead.
I just feel like you raised a good point that's important to hammer home in this conversation. This memo, the intention is not for it to encompass everything. It's an initial guidance. It is an initial memo so that people can anticipate. It doesn't include everything. We have drafted a lot, we worked a lot, but it's really to signal the direction that we're going towards, and so that people can sort of get ready. But I don't want there to be any sort of misconception that this is it and that that's the end of the work that is being done both internally by us here at the CCC and what has to be done externally in terms of the regs that municipalities and towns need to follow. So I just wanted to clarify that. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
And just to follow up on that, it really is the low-hanging fruit. It's not everything that we hope to encourage or frankly even require. It's creating transparency. It's figuring out how you can promote, support equity businesses in that application process. Where can you remove some barriers? So it's not everything. It's really just a start to say, start thinking about it. These are the types of things we'll be looking for. And, you know, a lot of these things like, you know, when it comes to some of the ancillary businesses, I think we'd have to do a little bit more thinking about, you know, what that is, because while that works under our social equity programming, I'd have to actually go back and look at, you know, and see, because one of the problems, not problems, one of the limitations we have is what we can and can't tell municipalities to do, right? An unfunded mandate, or, you know, we can't tell them to change their zoning rules, or, you know what I mean? So we've been trying to be very creative, but also trying to understand what we can and can't require communities to do. So again, this is just a first step. It's to say how they start going. It's to acknowledge that we have to still work out the sort of disconnect between who's going to be overseeing this, who's going to be fining, who's going to be providing those additional benefits, and that will be worked out through the continued regulatory process. Did I get that right, Commissioner Concepcion?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah, and Chair, let me, you know, I appreciate the creativity that has gone into this, again, to kind of get communities thinking about what their requirements are going to do. And I do like the suggestion of Commissioner Roy. We got to suggest what the carrot might be, or what the carrot will be. But like I said, I think there's some unique opportunities you have thrown out, and kind of get communities thinking in that proactive, creative, mindset. And again, if kind of throwing in this initial plan, kind of what that chair to your comment, you know, what the low hanging fruit is, I think that will help them comply and help them again start to get work on this sooner rather than later. And that's why I trust the team to put out something that will be fine tuned, and I'm happy to give that go ahead. I don't want to wait. I think the faster communities have this in the hand, the better off they'll be.
Thank you. So, Commissioner Concepcion?
Okay, I saw Chief Sinclair pop up and then pop out. I didn't know if he had any additional comment. I just wanted to give him an opportunity, if that was okay with you, Madam Chair.
Please.
No, nothing more is needed. The chair had mentioned her belief that the communications group had already reviewed it, so I just didn't know if there were any questions there, but we have not given a substantive review yet. Happy to.
Okay, thank you, and we'd appreciate it. I thought that we'd had that sent to you earlier in the week or last week, so that then my apology if we didn't get that to you. I thought we did. Okay, so I will. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Go ahead, Commissioner Camargo.
No, Madam Chair, I think I echo Commissioner Roy and Commissioner Stebbins in terms of adding some of those things on there and trying to get this out as soon as we can. Again, I would just, advocate for my recommendation of going back and looking at some of the stuff that we have written already, sort of those bullet points. And, I am a visual person, and when I get a memo, I read it. So I think, again, it's important to try to put as much as we can, but still not all of it, because I know we're still working on stuff. But I just want to say thank you for making this thoughtful and intentional. And I know that when cities and towns get this memo from us, they're going to read it from the beginning to the end. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Concepcion, would you care to move approval of this pending additional edits for grammar, spelling, or any other issues that may maintain the intent of what we're trying to do, but get this out in a timely fashion? How about that? Would you care to make that motion, if I said it the right way?
So moved.
Commissioner Roy, would you care to second that motion?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will take a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo, go ahead.
Just thank you, Madam Chair. I know that this is a lot of time and effort, and I know for both of us in our conversations and the development, that was all. And it's been really helpful to have these conversations. So this being our first sort of meeting like this, I look forward to more.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We appreciate the comments from everybody. I think it's great getting us in the room. So thank you. So having it moved and seconded, I will take a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. With the stipulations, the commission votes to approve this memo to be distributed to municipalities, and it passes 5-0. So thank you, everybody. And again, this is good wrangling here, so appreciate it. We'll move on to introductory discussion on commission-led trainings. Oh, Commissioner Roy?
I think Commissioner Camargo and I are going to say the same exact thing, if I had to guess. We need a couple of minutes.
Oh, no one can kick me remotely. All right, I will, Commissioner Camargo, I will accept a motion to take a, why don't we make it a 10-minute break because we're all in our house, so till 12:20. So would you like to move to recess until 12:20?
Thank you, Commissioner Roy, and so moved.
All right, Commissioner Rowe, will you second that motion?
Second.
I will take a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye, and thank you.
Chair votes aye, 5-0. Be back at 12:20. Okay, we have just checking Commissioner Camargo. I don't know if she's there yet. I'm gonna just there we go. Okay,
My apologies.
That's
There's
okay.
Cookies. There's cookies in the
Ah.
Boston office.
Back in session. Okay. All right, we will move to the commission-led trainings. Is that you, Commissioner Roy?
Oh, thank you. Yes, so for commission-led trainings, there has been opinion from, I think, all of us unanimously that as commissioners, we would like more trainings, and also in-person trainings. And with open meeting law, this is one of the areas outside of public meeting where we can get, all 5 of us can get together. So I have been working with legal. Mike Baker's been tremendous, and he has reached out to both ethics, and he's reached out to we want about the ethics commission, and then there was another one around heightened ethics. So we will have trainings. We're in the process of working with them, and I guess it's the dates are to be determined. And with regs, Mike and I haven't been able to sync back up to lock in a date, but we will be sure to work with all of your calendars to make sure you have plenty of advance notice. And we work with Kate and Grace to make sure you're aware of whatever trainings we do have in person. And I also put in for dynamics, been talking about dynamics training as well. So again, if there's any other trainings that as commissioners you would like to have, please, as secretary, feel free to approach me. And I look forward to us being able to get together. It never hurts to have more ethics training. Let's just put it that way.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Concepcion?
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Roy. I don't have a question on this item per se, but on the agenda itself. I know we've gotten into the practice of listing who the sponsor is of each topic. You know, we know the working group, so we are already sort of understood who was leading the social consumption and municipal equity conversation today. But I did not know who to send my questions to on this item here. So I would just say for future agendas, it would be helpful just to also include the name of the commissioner, or if it's staff who are leading that conversation.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate
Can
that.
I ask you a question? Would it be helpful, like once every quarter for me to do a secretary's report during meeting? Would that be helpful? As opposed to this is just randomly on the agenda?
Yeah, I think that might be helpful. Let's talk about that, and then we can also give you regular input as to additional training that might be implemented during the year.
And I have sent out the reminders as well with the embedded links, so everybody stays compliant with all of their mandatory trainings.
And that has been really helpful. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Madam Chair?
Okay. Yes, please, Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, Commissioner Roy, do you want us to give you some, first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
We've talked about additional trainings and all kinds of good stuff. Do you want us to send us suggestions? You know, when you said what would we like to see, I would love to, us as commissioners, go through some, diversity training and, unconscious bias training and some of that stuff that I think we don't have an opportunity to train on as a team. So I would love to see some of that stuff. I have some other ideas. I'm happy to send them to you now that I know that you're the sort of kind of taking the lead. And thank you for the reminders, the emails on the other trainings that we have to do all the time. So I appreciate that. So I'm happy to send you some more thoughts on some trainings that we should have in person. And I know, Mr. Executive Director, I've asked you this in the past. I think, the year before I asked you about some of these trainings as it relates, we're looking at these diversity plans from licensees and positive impact plans. And, you know, it also has to start with us, right? How do we make sure that we're covering our tracks in terms of training and knowing the trends and what's going on in the world of, you know, DEI and so on. So thank you.
Great, absolutely. Anyone send me suggestions? Oh, also another training is on open meeting law. So I know sometimes we have questions around open meeting law. So it would be ethics, our enhanced code of ethics, open meeting law, dynamics. These are all the things that I'm trying to work on. And then whatever other suggestions you may send my way.
Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Roy, thanks for taking the secretary's role to a new high level. I appreciate that.
I had a great role model, though. Thank you.
No, this is awesome work. I would, and I think the point I'm hearing from my other colleagues, love to find other opportunities, and not to necessarily put this all on you, Commissioner Roy, but perhaps when our new CPO comes on board, and to you, Mr. Executive Director, looking at those trainings that we can participate in with staff. I don't think it just needs to be limited to the 5 of us, learning about a topic from somebody on our team. I think we can participate in all those types of trainings or just get-togethers, talk about a topic. Obviously, we can't lean into our thoughts necessarily on a topic, but I think we can all be in the same room and hear all the same information. So that's not to Commissioner Roy, but maybe to the ED and our new CPO when they come on board to think about those and additional trainings. So we're all hearing the same thing. We're all hearing the same information, all getting updates, new details about the industry, whatever the topics are. Okay.
Any other questions?
No, and again, I just want to thank our legal team, especially Mike Baker. He's really he's delved into this for me, and he's got some great information. So I just want to thank him for his assistance.
Thank you. Okay. And seeing no additional hands up, we'll move on to the Executive Director Performance Review and Salary Recommendation.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. You have all now received the performance evaluation for the Executive Director for calendar year 2022. This was our first year using the new evaluation form to measure both the Executive Director's performance as well as progress or completing goals. I thank my colleagues for their endorsement of this new evaluation process. In less than 2 months, we'll be taking our next step in the current 2023 annual evaluation, the ED's mid-year update on his progress towards his 2023 goals. I do hope that I know each of you takes the opportunity to get updates on the progress of his goals during your regular check-ins. As you know, this process kind of kicks off at the end of the calendar year. The ED provided his own assessment of his performance, and that was shared with all of us. We each then completed our own review, submitted all of those comments and feedback to the acting Chief People Officer, who compiled all of that feedback into one document without any attribution to any commissioner. As the designated commissioner, I met with the ED along with our acting CPO and reviewed all of the feedback, assessed his overall score, and found a salary recommendation that I believe is consistent with the scoring structure provided to all staff who now all participate in our annual performance review. Overall, to kind of recap, the ED was scored as fully demonstrated in his job performance and critical skills. He was measured for communication, personal effectiveness, management qualities, and interaction with others. Though his review is overall positive in these areas, some specific areas stand out under these settings that I think invite further focus and attention by the ED based on his 2022 performance. Communications with commissioners on timely matters was one. Continuing to focus on delegation of work and timely execution of some decisions, proactive initiatives was another specific area. And again, in our form, the ED was allowed the opportunity to respond to all the feedback, and that is included in his response, and feedback is included in the summary. As I said, this is our first year using this new evaluation tool. I obviously welcome the chance at a future meeting to discuss any changes or tweaks we may wish to incorporate. In addition, we would welcome I would welcome the chance to have whoever our incoming CPO is, when they're hired, to review the process and tool as well. I don't want us to ever get complacent. I hate using this term in government that, oh, this is the way we've always done it. I'm always happy and open to looking at ways to refine it, make it better, both for the transparency and operation of the commission, as well for the professional respect that we need to pay our executive director. I know we've also had some conversations related to the PMS about should we align it with the fiscal year, but those are bigger topics down the line to take on. I just want to say that the ED does not have an easy job. One person reporting to 5 full-time bosses. I saw the demands of this job structure during my tenure at the Gaming Commission. However, effectively and fairly measuring the ED's performance is a critical responsibility. Chair, as you know, this process calls for designating a commissioner to undertake the review on behalf of the commission. I've appreciated the chance to kind of steer this process the last 2 years, but certainly invite one of my colleagues to step up and take on this responsibility for the current year. Moving on, I'd ask that the commission adopt the 3% increase to the ED salary retroactive to January 1st, as was the process for all staff. And I would ask that the ED follow up with the commission and provide a detailed professional development plan, as he suggests in his response, really no later than July 31st. That said, I invite my colleagues to make any comments that they would about the process or the ED's review, but that's my report.
Any comments or questions? One of the brief conversations I had with Commissioner Stebbins, and first of all, I'd like to start out by saying thank you very much for doing this. This process, this new way of doing things predated my being appointed to the commission. So I sort of step into this halfway through. And, I think we're all still trying to sort of figure out the sort of leadership and responsibilities of the commissioners, in particular the chair, and the executive director and the senior staff. One of the things that I had suggested, and one of the things I think is really important, and it's one of the reasons that we're here today, is all 5 of us having an opportunity to have a conversation at the same time. And while I think that this performance review and salary recommendation, that you've done an excellent job on this, I think that it is important and fair. One of the things that I think might be helpful as we sort of consider voting positively on this is potentially, having an executive session where all 5 of us, and the executive director can have a conversation, because a lot of this was anonymized, because this is, certainly a public document, and we want this to be fair. But obviously, there are some issues that, some of us, I can only speak for myself. There are some issues that I put in there about performance that I think is important for all 5 of us to be able to sort of talk to the executive director, have some sort of answers, make some sort of pointed comments about improvement. We do know that one state senator has filed legislation to create an inspector general's position that will sit inside the Cannabis Control Commission, because they have some concerns, about the kind of operations, of the commission. While I have been very pleased, working with the executive director Collins, and he certainly is, he has demonstrated, a great intellect, a great legal mind. He is a wonderful person to deal with. One of the issues that I raised is the sort of, I think it's very important for the executive director to be leading from the top down. And I think that some of the problems that have occurred have been management from the bottom up. And so, I raised that in my review, and I don't know, whether other folks think it might be appropriate to have an executive session to be able to have some of those more, in-depth conversations with the executive director. And frankly, I'd love to, hear, from Sean Collins on that, what he thinks. So again, I just wanted to throw that out there. I thank Commissioner Stebbins for what he's done. I thank Executive Director Collins for the job that he's done. This place has grown like a rocket, gone up like a rocket, with so many changes and so much responsibility. But I've, stated on a couple of occasions that 5 years in, how we function, how we, determine where resources or, employee power goes. I think we may need a rethink about that. I know Commissioner Stebbins talked about doing some leadership training, but what I might prefer instead, and would like some, maybe input from my fellow commissioners, is really looking at where this organization is right now. We now top over 100, maybe 112 employees 5 years in, making sure that we have the resources in the right place. For instance, we were talking, with Cedric Sinclair about having the right resources in place to help municipalities determine who would qualify for special treatment under municipal equity. Do we have the right people in place to make sure that that important function gets done? Do we have the right resources in place to make sure that investigations and licensing can do their job in a reasonable amount of time and with enough training and support, not only for our individual employees, but training and support for licensees as well. So anyway, I've kind of hit to a lot of different fields. That's sort of my initial response. And I don't know if anybody else would like to kind of chime in, but again, thanking you, Bruce, for doing this, because this is not an easy job and it takes a lot of time to get this done, and thanking Sean for being a part of this process too. Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. This was a lot of work. So I appreciate the effort here in the new format. I would appreciate the opportunity to go into an executive session because this is a 30,000 feet evaluation, and some of the stuff, if we go granular, it might be sensitive in nature, and I would appreciate the opportunity to be able to go granular having executive session in an executive session environment.
Any other commissioners have any comments or response either to that or to the report itself or to the salary recommendation? Commissioner Stebbins?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quickly, and appreciate your comments and Commissioner Roy's comments. Understand and give some context to the performance review you have in front of you, and I think I can say this. When I sat with the executive director and the chief people officer, we went through all the comments. Again, nothing is excluded. The granular, the macro, every comment is made available to the executive director. So he sees it all of that feedback. I think to his credit, he knows where it's coming from. He appreciates where it's coming from and understands it. I think what you find in the overall review that's presented for all of you today is my best attempt to pull together what I saw as obviously the scoring, but also as many of the consensus comments as I could. So, or else we'd have a much longer document. So just to give some context to the document that you have in front of you, and again, remind folks that all of our comments, as detailed and granular, as macro as they were, are all shared with the executive director. So he does see all of it.
Okay. Commissioners Concepcion or Camargo, are there any comments that you'd like to make? Any thoughts about the process itself?
Not at this time. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay. Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah, and I've said this before, Madam Chair, maybe you weren't here, but I've said it before with the process for the executive director that we should incorporate maybe next year a 360. Because I think, one of the challenges is that and Sean, thank you for all your work and everything that you're doing and have done and will continue to do. But our work with him is limited at times, right? Because there's 5 of us. And so I think, having, and, I did this on my prior job, we all had 360 reviews where it came from, leadership or whoever's in those roles in the future, right? So not just for our current executive director, but future executive directors. It's good to, we have thoughts and we see things. And it would be also good to incorporate what the team also sees, from another perspective. But thank you, Commissioner Stebbins, for, working on this. I know it's not easy, Sean. This is the most awkwardest part of your job. It almost sucks. So I thank you for, being patient with us and sort of going through the process while we're doing this. So thank you.
Commissioner Concepcion, then Commissioner Roy.
I just wanted to know if the executive director either wanted an opportunity to speak or was going to give an opportunity to speak.
I was going to ask that. I was going to ask. Yeah, Commissioner Roy, did you want to comment or first, or do we?
Yeah, and I would love to hear from Executive Director Collins. Just wondering if maybe because this is a really time-consuming project, maybe 2 commissioners could be assigned, work together on this moving forward, because there is a lot to compile, and it is you have to anonymize it and compile it, and so just throwing it out there so it doesn't fall on one person's plate. Maybe 2 commissioners could partner on this.
Yeah,
Mr. Stebbins.
Yeah,
please,
Chair, if I could, and thank you, Commissioner Roy, for the suggestion. You bringing that up, I do need to take a moment and stop and thank our acting CPO, Justin Schrader, because Justin did a lot of the pulling together. So I wasn't privy to where all the comments obviously were coming in. But thank Justin for all of his work on that. I think, yeah, you have an interesting proposal of using 2 commissioners. I think we need to run that by legal and make sure inviting a subcommittee wouldn't necessarily trip some of the open meeting law guidelines that we have to subscribe to. But
Commissioner Concepcion.
To Commissioner Roy's suggestion, I believe this was something that we discussed I forgot how many moons ago. We talked about why there was only 1 commissioner, but it might be worth revisiting. But at that time, we had there was a concern around open meeting law and having different commissioner opinions being reviewed by more than just 1 commissioner. I believe that was the feedback that we received, that there was some complications and concerns around open meeting law. But I do think it's worth, getting another opinion as well.
Commissioner Roy.
No, thank you for that. That must have been many moons ago. Thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Okay. Executive Director Collins, would you like to sort of respond maybe about the process and, your thinking around this? I'd appreciate that.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, commissioners. I think it was Commissioner Camargo that alluded to this being awkward or uncomfortable or whatever it is. That's a true statement, without a doubt. At the same time, one thing that's not lost on me is I do serve at the pleasure of the commission, and obviously your feedback is crucial to our collective success, but also my success as your executive director, and obviously on behalf of our entire team, and ensuring that they have clear direction, clear strategy, clear vision, and obviously I am an employee that is accountable to you, and I do view a degree of accountability to our team as well. The process itself, I want to just thank Commissioner Stebbins for serving as an ambassador on behalf of the commissioners. Obviously, he acknowledged the work of Justin Schrader as well, who does compile all of this. What I'll just add to this is obviously the comments and feedback are valuable to me personally, obviously in areas that are, as you can imagine, I guess, I tend to dwell on or key right in on the things that need to be acknowledged, addressed, or improved. And I don't, not that I block out the other things, but it's either human nature or certainly my nature to look at where I need to devote energy and time and things like that. In my tenure here, it's been just over 5 years now. I have not had a consistent annual approach to this, so I respect that it is an evolution that occurs. And I would just argue, therefore, there is no one way to do this clearly. Our staff does go through a performance management system and process that is now in its maybe perhaps the 3rd year of its development. It seems to work, but obviously, again, that it doesn't occur in public. It doesn't occur with a public body. So that wrinkle is obviously a compelling and certainly a complicating factor. Nonetheless, I appreciate that we're trying to bring as much synergy to this as possible. I did engage in this process throughout whether it be the mid-year updates or the closeout, providing a self-evaluation, and obviously I hope it was informative for you. And then again, I just all of your comments have already been absorbed by me, taken to heart. And I think finally, to Commissioner Stebbins' point, I do enjoy our opportunities to catch up individually as well, because it does provide me real-time feedback, which obviously is going to be helpful throughout the course of the year. This is not the only time I should be getting any update or feedback on my performance. It should be a regular occurrence, which is healthy. And then again, lastly, is I try not to take any of this stuff personally. I realize that as you reflect on where the agency is, I am your vehicle for that reflection to occur. And again, certainly those aspects that are pertinent to my performance, where I need to either grow or improve or hone my skills, that is information that I do absorb personally. At the same time, I realize again that your opportunity to move the needle or put your thumb on the scale generally comes through me and your reflection of my performance. So again, I try to make sure that I'm measured in my response, and I hope that you find in the document that is provided to you that my response is reflective of that, including too that professional development opportunity that I would look forward to pursuing. I'm also again, this is a 2022 process. I realize we're in May at this point, but this isn't simple, this isn't easy, and I respect that. So again, just grateful for the chance to get your feedback and share my own.
Thank you. And then, so maybe this is, a thought for the next process, and understanding the limitations of open meeting, understanding having more than one commissioner see the opinions of multiple commissioners, although it's my understanding that they are anonymized to allow those thoughts and recommendations to be shared. I guess from my perspective, one of the things that I think is important that we don't get a chance as 5 commissioners to really sit all together with Sean, which is why understanding this process and making sure that we continue to abide by open meeting law, but in the future, consider going into executive session while we have one commissioner leading this process. The one thing I have found missing in how we function is the ability for all 5 of us to get on the same page and to do that in a way that complies with the law. So, whereas, today it's not appropriate for us to go into executive session, we're sort of getting to the end of this. I do think that going forward, it's really important for us to build this in, because I think that hearing the perspective of other commissioners, it's been important during our governance process, but we don't get to do this very often. So in thinking about this process going forward, I think that this is something we may want to build in going forward. And I don't know if Commissioner Stebbins or anybody has any thoughts on that. Commissioner Roy?
Commissioner Stebbins brought up a good point. Should we pivot this to a fiscal year so it aligns with your goals? And if so, is now the time? Because we have 2 different calendars here. And should we make them one, because it speaks to your goals directly if we align the calendar? So I just wanted to, is now the time? I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, Commissioner Stebbins, what do you think? Why don't we just do that today? What would be the downside of that?
I'm open to it. I wouldn't.
Or it hasn't
necessarily...
been published. It hasn't been published yet. Can we put this on our agenda?
Exactly.
Is it?
I'm happy to talk about it. I think it's also understanding, and let me just say, I think is I was working on this process with our former PO and with our COO, Alyssa Stack, we kept talking about this, like, how does the ED achieve his goals when he starts the year not knowing what his budget is going to be for the second half of the year. So there's that piece of it, and allowing him to tie his goals to what resources we might get from the legislature. I'm open to that discussion. And I think that would also have a cascading effect into what does that do to the rest of the staff who are also evaluated on their contribution to the goals right now in the calendar year. They'd also have to be moved over to trying to assess that in the fiscal year as well. But I think it's important.
Would they?
I think it's a fair question to have.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to, I could see how they could, it might be a good idea, but it might not be necessary to change that for everybody right now. And I don't know what the executive director thinks of that.
I'm happy to respond. I saw Commissioner Roy had her hand up as well, so I don't want to interrupt her.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, that is part of my question, but two-pronged. Sean, how do you feel personally for the executive director's position for the review to be based on a fiscal year? And then secondly, is that a necessity to have staff on the same calendar as you? So similar question. Thank you.
I think second question first. I think there should be at least alignment between whenever my goals are set by the commission, and then I think the staff's goals, obviously, and the intent being that they cascade from there. There should be a consistency between the two. My argument would be that I think the fiscal year makes the most logical sense, given that I can tell you now, for instance, when departmental goals are set, we are in a mid-year of a budget. So the ability to say we're going to take on this new initiative is necessarily delayed potentially, or we need to pivot existing resources. Or the other remark or defense becomes, I couldn't start that project because I didn't know what we would have for a budget. And so then it becomes a mid-year check-in that, and again, our staff, much like the performance management system you've deployed for me, at least the past year, does include that mid-year check-in point as well. Which is always documented and things of that nature. So my recommendation, and I guess my personal preference, would be for the fiscal year, the disruption would be a one-time disruption, and then we just get back on track, so to speak. So there's never going to be a clean way to rip that Band-Aid. I think we just do it. But again, Madam Chair, you already reached the conclusion I was going to wave my arms about around posting. But other than that, I would say too, at this point, I have my existing goals for the calendar year based on your discussion back in January, I believe it was, or maybe it was December, to anticipate January. I therefore have an upcoming mid-year check-in with you anyway for the month of July. So that could be a good opportunity to maybe consider this as do we want to reconstitute those goals, then declare them and kick them out by a calendar year? I'm thinking out loud, which is always dangerous, but I'd say that potential for not seamless, but a clean pivot exists. And then again, I certainly would, it's your decision to make, but that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Concepcion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question. I know Commissioner Roy, at the beginning of this conversation, you asked for us to go into executive session. And Chairwoman, if I heard you right, you said that this was not an appropriate time to go into executive session. I feel like that went over my head. Do you mind elaborating?
It wasn't posted. And so, you know, we did not properly post it, and that is something that does have to be posted. You know, I sort of looked about what you can and cannot discuss in an executive session, and one of the things allowed for in executive session is the negotiation of, you know, pay or, you know, with non-union employees. So, I felt that we had, that ability. It's really just, for my purpose. Look, I'm happy with the job that Commissioner Stebbins did. I think it's really important, but I also think that we get few opportunities to be able to come together to have those frank conversations that I think put us in a better position, to not only provide incentives for the executive director, but also to make sure that we're on the same page. Because some of the measurements, that I've looked at, sort of stepping in midway here. I don't know if that would be what some of the things that I would be saying adequately measure performance. But A, it's not timely because we haven't posted it. B, topically, it is timely to have that conversation. But I would leave that to others to see what they think.
And so does this now leave an opportunity at our next conversation to go into executive session? Is that what you're, okay.
We would have to post that.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we could post that and we could change the time frame too. So, Commissioner Roy?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Commissioner Concepcion. So I looked at it as an opportunity, and when we've met in governance and things come to the surface, and then we're there for governance. So we can't do a deep dive into some of the issues that have bubbled up. And an executive session would be an opportunity, and some of it's sensitive in nature, to just be able to have that conversation. So I looked at it as an opportunity to go a little bit more granular for things that might be a little bit sensitive in nature.
And I almost don't want to use the word sensitive. I think that it's really the five of us all getting on the same page about, because Sean can have one-on-ones, but we can't all be in there, and that's, that was what I suggested. So, I don't know how others feel, whether or not we incorporate that here or in our next meeting, not today, or we begin to figure out how to incorporate that opportunity to get all five of us, in the room. Frankly, I'm more concerned about our 360, how we kind of, all view Sean's performance, and we all have areas where we think he's hitting out of the park. We all have areas where we go, we think you can do a better job here. So I hate to use the word sensitive, because it's not like I don't think anyone is alluding to anything that isn't public, that isn't out there. Yeah. So you know what I'm saying? I want to be sensitive about the word sensitive, because I think it implies something that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to have it as a different connotation. Anytime you negotiate someone's salary, that alone is sensitive, I feel. Right. So I don't need to have a different connotation.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that, because I think I know what you mean. But anyway, Commissioner Stebbins and then Commissioner Camargo.
Sure. And listen, this is a healthy discussion for all of us to have. We all want to try to provide the executive director with constructive feedback. I would just raise a caution flag about the opportunity to go into executive session. One, to have what I think are these types of discussions, but two, also reflect on whatever we say in executive session. Once the reason for executive session goes away, all of those meeting minutes come out anyways. Right. So
everything is public. Yes.
Right. So I think, excuse me, I think we should consider, let's try to find the right vehicle to provide additional feedback and direction. And again, I echo your comment, Chair, for all of us, all five of us, to somehow be on the same page, because certainly that would probably make the ED's life a lot easier if he had a consensus of where all five of us were coming from. But I just wanted to interject and again raise a caution flag where I think it's appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Camargo, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Bruce sort of answered my question. And Sean, I've given you brutal feedback for all the great and all the room for improvement that you have in leading this agency. And I think that the tool that was provided for us to give comments, I don't know what everyone else wrote, obviously, but having read this document, I could tell that it was very concise and very thoughtful and very intentional. The question that we had earlier around sort of switching it to the budget time, I would welcome that conversation again, so that we can figure out, like you said, Sean, how do we pull that Band-Aid if that's what we want to do? But we have to be on the same page for that and not wait too far along to then do that, because it'll operationally, it's going to throw everything, not throw everything off, but somewhat in terms of schedules and other folks and your work as well as the executive director. So those are just my thoughts.
Can Commissioner Stebbins, can I raise, maybe a thought that as we sort of, I see this sort of next review, right? For, this is 2022, 2023, it'll be 23, 24. In looking at the open meeting law and looking at executive session, if it might be possible for us to maybe go into executive session to begin that negotiation process, where we can, 5 of us can get on the same page, rather than Commissioner O'Brien, what are your priorities? Commissioner Roy, what are your priorities? Because we're sometimes asked these we're asked these priorities kind of in a vacuum. And so it might be helpful, making sure that we're abiding by the open meeting policy, that we begin this next process in executive session that allows us to have a little bit more breathing room. And again, it's breathing room that ultimately, you're going to see the inhales, the exhales, and the sputters or whatever comes out. And that's ultimately, but I do think that, going into executive session can be a helpful forum. So I just wanted to raise that, as a thought, and as we reconfigure this performance review timing and maybe process that maybe we consider doing that as a launch to this negotiation for the next review period and salary consideration. So I just would raise that to think about it and see how we can do that within the law.
I got to I'm sorry.
You got to unpack.
Yeah, I got to unpack a little bit of that. Listen, I agree with everybody's consensus that we need to shift his goals to, aligning it with the fiscal year. I think that makes sense. It's a clearer picture of where the ED is going to be. I hate to say what the ED is going to be able to accomplish based on the resources made available to him. I think there's a further conversation about, again, what I raised before, that cascading effect down to the rest of the staff. Again, and kind of what this new timetable would be. I think that all merits a good conversation. I think we could tie it to also some input from, again, whoever our new chief people officer might be, to weigh in on the process itself, and take into consideration some of the other ideas that have been put forward in the past about 360s and other things. I get that. I might disagree with Commissioner Camargo on that point, but give us a chance to kind of review that as a whole new landscape for the review. Again, I question, again, I think there's a way we can have a thoughtful conversation that doesn't necessarily require us to go into executive session and maybe run afoul of the law, but I'd love to give that some thought and consideration. Your last point about the salary recommendation, I don't know if you're talking about future salary recommendations or the ones that we're talking about here today. I don't know if those are tied together or not. I couldn't make that out.
I'm talking about, this is all part of a performance review and salary negotiation, but it starts with, where do we start? Right? Mm-hmm. What those standards are. And I feel like it's been a little bit disembodied, that we ask us for our priorities. And I feel that that's a little squishy. I mean, frankly, I'd like to be thinking about, maybe not even something that Sean has to do, but maybe some direct reports or additional staff, that what are the functioning things we'd like to see, within our organization. Again, I have stated before that I think we need to do, I won't say a 360 review of Sean. I say a 360 review of how our organization functions. Do we have, the right personnel in the right places? Do we have enough people in investigation versus, more people doing, whatever? That's one of the things that I'd like us to be able to come together, because as I've seen the process, I feel like it's squishy. What are your priorities, and how do we fit your priorities into what the executive director has to do? I think that it's more, I think the issues that we're facing and the sort of weaker parts, Sean got great, at least for me, Sean got great grades for policy, for communication, for intellect, for all of those other things. But it's the more granular stuff of how this place functions that I think, need an overhaul right now. And as we're coming out of COVID, just a week and a half ago, sort of COVID and all of, those issues are at least theoretically in the rearview mirror. I think that an organization that's been here for 5 years, that 3 of those 5 years has been remote, creates a whole new set of issues that I think we as a commission need to grapple with. And that's why I'm saying, is there a way that we can, under the exemption for salary negotiation, allow us to not only change that salary timing and structure, but how do we begin that negotiation by more artfully setting goals that are clear and are measurable? So that's my speech. That's my 3rd speech today, but that's my speech.
I'm happy to.
I don't think I don't think that it requires a response, but it's just something that I'd like us to sort of look at how we can do that, because I think that we can get better at setting expectations for the executive director, and also better setting expectations that cascade, that we understand that the priorities of what we're doing are set at the very top in conjunction with the executive director. And sometimes I feel that those priorities kind of get baked into what we're doing, how we're spending money, the impact we're having or not having. And that's the conversation I would like to have with all of my fellow commissioners at the table legally. So
allow me to chime in. I completely agree. I think some of this can all be built out of a new review process and a new calendar for the executive director. I do want to try to get to some resolution of, putting forward a motion to, approve the recommendation for the 3% increase, again, based on his 2022 performance review. But I hear you, Chair. I think, there's a lot of creativity and some planning we can do to look at a new process that works not only for the ED and how the commission operates, but for all of us to have these conversations.
Thank you. Commissioner Camargo?
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you for your speech. Like you said, that was no, that was food for thought on all of it. I'm curious, Mr. Executive Director, what is a timeline with our Chief People Officer hire? Because I feel like this is a great project that will allow us commissioners to, work with someone with this project. So I'm just curious where we're at. If you can share, if you can't, then don't. But
sure, Madam Chair, may I?
Please, we're an open meeting. Share.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Camargo, for the question. We are interviewing this week, so it was my hope to have a candidate identified by perhaps the end of the month. But obviously, I don't want to. We need to find the right candidate, and then certainly, if there's risk of spilling into the earliest days of June, I guess that's acceptable. At the same time, we are pursuing it with urgency and energy. But again, the intention is to find the right candidate as well. So, but interviews are occurring this week. In person, I should note too. In-person interviews.
Commissioner Camargo, you done? You're looking up. You're thinking.
Yeah, I'll pass it on. I'm thinking. Thank you.
Okay, all right, Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Executive Director, Chair O'Brien brought up a good point, and I never really thought of it that way, that out of the 5 years, almost 3 have been in remote. So can you just talk to that a little bit? And I know we've been working on return to office, and I just think it's part of the bigger picture here at the commission. I'm sure folks are curious to hear.
Sure, thank you, Commissioner. I was holding or reserving, I guess, this update for the June public meeting as part of a report, but I can certainly share, I guess, a number of thoughts and plans. First, as far as being remote, that is largely the case. That is true. Our staff, however, have been in and around the office, certainly in the context of working groups as well, but also, I think importantly, our staff has been in the field throughout COVID too. So I don't want anyone externally or outside the agency to assume that everybody logs in from home and sort of never ventures out. Obviously, as we know, our staff are, a good portion of our staff are mobile and again, in the field throughout the Commonwealth. I did meet with our staff as recently as last week and indicated that we are going to begin the process of returning to both our Worcester and Boston offices in a permanent way. And obviously, therefore, putting in place what I hope will be a durable and manageable policy. And I think the other observation I'll make too is throughout COVID, it is now, and I keep saying I suspect or I believe, I'm convinced the majority of our staff have actually joined us throughout COVID. So when I keep referring to a return to office as sort of like a first day back to school, for some of our staff, it's going to be the first day of school, period. As far as the where do I go, where do I sit, what are those logistics? And so that's something that needs to be worked out certainly with our operations, our IT folks. And then the other aspect that I think is important too is we have 2 offices, Boston as a satellite, Worcester as a headquarters. Worcester has the larger footprint. If we were to return everybody to our headquarters, we would not have sufficient space for everybody. During COVID, we've outgrown that space. That is, if anyone obviously is responsible, I'd certainly say it lands with me. But we were mapping out 5 years ago what we were going to look like 5 years, 10 years from now. And again, it was best guess estimate at the time. The advantage we have is that's if everybody was in the office together at the same day, at the same time. As I just noted, the largest subset of our staff, our investigators and compliance officers, are in the field. So we don't need to accommodate necessarily permanent spaces for them. We really want to adopt a more flexible space. We describe it as hoteling. Someone can come in, plug in their laptop, charge it up, make phone calls, join a docking station, and then have full use of their PC, etc., without having to have a dedicated space. That is going to be my hope. We're going to put that work in over the summer months and really have a final plan in place by at the latest the month of September. The other point I made to our staff, of course, in the full return to office was that I would give them sufficient time, ideally 90 days, and I've already provided them more than 90 days, so that they could make arrangements for things like childcare, etc., to ensure that we were not as disruptive as a decision could be. And so again, I also want to acknowledge too, especially Commissioners Roy and Concepcion for your individual contributions to that exercise. And we're not done by any means, but this has been an inclusive and hopefully deliberative process, but we need to start making these decisions to ensure that we're getting the full maximized use out of our space. So, and again, I will also want to acknowledge our staff has been in and out of the office throughout the pandemic. This is looking at really that sort of future of work and how we function in a more permanent way and less of an ad hoc style as we've enjoyed the past couple of months.
Sean,
is that responsive?
Sean, yeah, what are the total number of employees that we have right now as of today? And I see you sent out an email earlier. We just hired somebody new, so.
We did, yes. I don't know if I'm counting them in the space. You mentioned that I think it was 112 or 115. I believe that's our head count as of today. I will get a specific, precise number to you, but you were accurate in that range earlier.
And how many total seats do we have? Never mind offices, but how many seats do we have between Boston and Worcester?
That is another number I will get you as far as head count as well, that availability. Okay. I just, again, I hate to give you the wrong number and
That's
have
okay.
it misquoted. So but I will provide you both of those data. I'll provide each commissioner both those data points.
Thank you. Does anybody else have other questions? Commissioner Roy?
Yeah, so thank you, Sean. That was a great update. So I guess the only question I have is, did you announce the date certain? I didn't hear that.
Sure. I announced it to our staff on last Friday. There were members of our staff that were not present, so I apologize to them that you're getting this news in this environment, but it would be September 11th, Monday, September 11th.
Okay.
The week after Labor Day.
Okay.
And again, it's not as if it's here's the decision, I will see you September 11th. It was here is the decision as to the date, and then all those details get worked out as far as impact on individual departments and individuals. There is an expectation that individual staff members will be in the office at least a number of days a week. So,
okay.
And then
I wasn't sure.
hybrid is what I'm referring to it as. Again, just to meet that expectation of combination of work from home and work in the office.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions or comments? If hearing none, Commissioner Stebbins, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. Madam Chair, I'd move that the commission approve a 3% increase with a retroactive payment back to January 1st, 2023, which is consistent with all staff, bringing the executive director's salary to $207,936.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Having been moved and seconded, are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, I will take a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record reflect. This is approved 5 in favor and none opposed. Now what? Let's see. Where's my?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your ongoing and important leadership. We appreciate it. Okay. So having gotten through that, new business not anticipated at the time of posting. I don't think there's anything here. Going once, going twice. The next meeting date will be, and I hope I got this right, June 8th. That's correct. Okay, where is it? June 8th, there it is, at 10 a.m. And it says remote via Teams, but that will be in person. Commissioner Roy?
The previous slide on new business.
Yep.
Could we get a definition from legal? Because Commissioner Camargo she brought one up one time and we couldn't vote on it, even though we tried to get it under new business. Are we allowed to vote on new business? Like, can we get a definition of what's allowed under new business and what is not allowed under new business from legal?
Yeah. I think we're going to be doing some open meeting training. So is that appropriate for that?
Well, I don't know.
I think someone is leading that.
If legal
fight.
could help provide us a definition of new business and what is allowed under new business.
Okay, thank you. Right. Any other comments or questions before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Hearing Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. I really enjoyed this meeting. I enjoyed our thoughtful conversations. And again, this is the only chance that we really have to do this. Commission or Chair, are you thinking about another date in June that we would have this type of policy?
Yes, let me sort of circle back with everyone to find. So again, thank you for stating that. So just to sort of provide the public with some understanding what we're doing. We obviously have our regular meetings where we will have a full and robust consideration of licenses, applications, things like that, ongoing, budget updates, things like that. These second meetings are primarily focused on giving us, within the open meeting law, the opportunity to talk through issues. We've had some very good conversations today. And again, just reminding people that you don't understand how hard it is to work as a team under open meeting law until you've had to work as a team under open meeting law, and it's not easy. So this is so we hope to keep these meetings, these second meetings, limited to sort of agenda topics and things that we'd like to sort of circulate with our fellow commissioners. And obviously, and thank you, Sean. Sean Collins had come up with the idea that we had 2 non-controversial votes on some equity applicants to get their final license. And so we were happy to incorporate equity into this, but generally, While we reserve the right, this is a regular meeting that will have an agenda that is posted, and we reserve the right to do other things. We will target this on really issues and sharing ideas and, sort of noodling different topics that we want to do as a group. So, but I think we need to work with the staff to figure out what is convenient for everybody. And is this sort of a floating or is it a standing date? Because we all still are doing our regulatory writing right now. And the public doesn't know this, but, we 2 days a week, generally Tuesdays and Thursdays, each group is meeting for 3, hours a day. And Commissioner Concepcion doubles up because she's the only one on 2 different groups. So her entire day on Tuesday and Thursday is taken up on these 2 groups. But we are getting to a point where we hope that a lot of the regulatory writing will be tailing off at least for 2 of the 3 groups. So I think I've covered everything that I need to cover. The answer is I didn't answer your question, but we'll get an answer to that soon enough. So unless anyone else, Commissioner Camargo, any last?
No, Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad you said what you said, just because it allows us to have a little bit of clarity. I know that this meeting date came quickly and we just finished our last meeting. So I think being able to have the conversation amongst us, like, are we going to do this for like the next 3 months and then we're going to take a month off and then we'll come back 3 months again, so just trying to take the temperature, one of, how it works for us, but also for our teams internally. Cause there's so many timelines internally. And also the preparation for all these meetings are very real. And we're overachievers on this commission, which I appreciate. So we want to read everything. We want to understand everything. So just being mindful of the timing of it. But I'm glad that you said all the comments that you said. And I echo Commissioner Stebbins' point as well, in terms of just being excited about having these policy discussions, but just being mindful of the timing and also the behind the scenes. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and again, and that's part of, to let the public know, it's part of why we did this sort of hybrid, remote, to make sure that we are sensitive to the wear and tear on staff. I certainly like having in-person conversation better than via a screen. But we'll work out the details, and certainly, making sure, maybe the end of August is maybe not a great time for everybody. So try to work with the individual commissioners to make sure that, 1, we're productive, that we're not meeting for meeting's sake, and 2, we're trying to, deal with everyone, the sort of personal issues and work challenges that everyone has. So, again, there's no answer there, but there's listening. So we're gonna figure out how that works. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Concepcion, would you care to make that motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Camargo, would you like to second that motion?
Second.
Having been moved and seconded, I will take a call of the roll. Commissioner Camargo.
Enthusiastically, aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record reflect. 5 in favor, none opposed. Next meeting will be June 8th at 10 a.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a good